Hey, what's up? It's cute what if? This side. Today we will be seeing what if Deku became the Shadow Monarch. Before we move ahead with the FIC, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for future what ifs like this. Izuku Kajinu introduced himself and said that this was the story of how he became the strongest man in the universe, and then began at the beginning. A young boy with green hair was surrounded and bullied by people he once called friends. They shoved and struck him in an aggressive, anime-style scuffle, leaving him battered and bruised. Izuku wondered how his life had come to this. Izumi told him to give up and that he would never be a hero. Katsumi told him to give up and called him useless. Shoko called him pathetic and weak. Several girls from Class 1A taunted him for being quirkless and said they regretted ever paying him any attention. Bakugo mocked him as a useless weakling who should never have been born. Shoto told him he was a disgrace to his family name. The boys from Class 1A insisted that a pathetic weakling like him could never be a hero and told him to give up. After an extended beating, they left him behind, battered and injured but alive. Izuku walked home, tears falling as he wondered why his life had turned out this way and reminded himself that he had not chosen to be born quirkless. He remembered the day 6 years earlier when, at 4 years old, his family had gone to the quirk doctor and discovered that he had no quirk while Izumi had a strong telekinetic power. Since that time, Izumi and others had begun to neglect and mistreat Izuku, and Class 1A had made his life miserable every day. He had hoped they would change, but they never had. Under a bridge, Izuku vowed that when he reached home he would take his things and run away. He did not notice that something was following him. Svi, a sinister voice, laughed and claimed to have found a new body to take over, then lunged toward Izuku in an attempt to possess him. The shadowy presence reached for him when the number 1 hero appeared and intervened, driving the attacker off and rescuing the boy in a flashy, heroic display. Afterward, Izuku gathered his courage and asked the number 1 hero whether a quirkless person could become a hero. All Might dismissed him and said that quirkless people could not become heroes and would only get in the way of those with quirks. All Might then turned and departed, leaving Izuku heartbroken and his dream crushed by his idol. When Izuku approached the Yagi mansion, he stopped and saw his stern mother, his sister, and her friends outside. He hid nearby to listen to their conversation. Their mother called for Izumi to come closer, and Izumi obliged. The family asked them to wait, then went inside and changed. They emerged in hero costumes, revealing that Izumi's parents were Green Storm, the number 2 hero of Japan, and All Might, the number 1 hero and symbol of peace. Izumi and her friends were stunned by the reveal, and their classmates reacted with awe. Izuku watched and listened from his hiding place, taking in everything he had just seen. All Might and Inko explained the history of One for All and asked Izumi to take the quirk, and Izumi agreed. The revelation shocked Izuku. His father had been quirkless and had treated him as if he did not matter. Izuku felt a surge of anger and, from a distance, watched his family with an emotionless face. He decided to leave, but not before writing them a letter. The Yagis did not notice his absence. Izuku walked through a cold, dark forest. He had not eaten, and exhaustion overtook him until he fainted. Inside his mindscape, Izuku wondered where he was. A presence introduced itself as Ashbourne, the Monarch of Shadows, and Izuku felt the man's aura and trembled. Ashbourne explained that they were in Izuku's mindscape and that he had chosen Izuku as his successor. Ashbourne told Izuku not to sell himself short. He had seen Izuku's difficult life and his courage in the hardest times, and he believed Izuku had the heart of a hero. Izuku, surprised that someone believed in him, cried and accepted Ashbourne's offer to become his successor. Ashbourne then explained his powers, his past, and that once the power was transferred he would rest in the afterlife and they would never see each other again. Izuku, a little sad, promised to make Ashbourne proud. Before the transfer, Izuku asked for a new name so he would not be tied to his past. Ashbourne named him Izuku Kajinu, the new Shadow Monarch. They clasped hands for the transfer, and Ashbourne bade him farewell, urging Izuku to show everyone they had been wrong to underestimate him. Izuku left the mindscape. When he woke, he felt different. At a lake, he examined his reflection and noted the changes. His eyes glowed purple. A system interface appeared and welcomed the player. Izuku resolved to become the strongest. With the money Ashbourne had left him, Izuku decided to find a place to live. He walked through a Japanese city, still a child, and assumed his family had not noticed that he was gone. He pulled his hoodie up and continued down the street. A scream drew him to an alley. 3 men surrounded a frightened little girl beside a van. One man ordered her to get in. She refused and was slapped, falling to the ground. Another man suggested disposing of her, and the third drew a gun and seemed ready to use it. Izuku stepped forward and demanded that they leave the girl alone. The leader threatened Izuku, then lunged with a knife. Izuku reacted instantly, seizing the attacker and throwing him with enough force to dent the pavement. The man was incapacitated by the blow. The other 2 rushed him, and Izuku summoned a dagger from an inventory interface. A system notification identified the weapon as Risaka's Fong, Class C. Izuku moved with blinding speed in a calm, controlled flurry of strikes that incapacitated both attackers without graphic injury. The system then indicated that he had leveled up 3 times. The young girl watched in awe at his speed and power. Izuku approached and checked that the girl was all right. She answered that she was okay and thanked him. She introduced herself as Ei Radian. Izuku introduced himself as Izuku Kajinu and offered her a place to stay. Tai, surprised and relieved, agreed to stay with him. Izuku asked why she had been alone. Ei explained that her parents had been killed by villains. Izuku felt sympathy and, wanting to help, repeated his offer. As they left the alley together, Ei told Izuku she would not leave him and would always be there for him. Izuku was taken aback but smiled. Her presence warmed him and gave him a new purpose. He felt glad to have met her. Izuku walked to the new house with Ei, using the money Ashbourne had left for him. The small moving day felt like a turning point. The house was theirs now, paid for by a legacy that had changed everything. Izuku asked the system to display his current stats. The system acknowledged and presented his status. Name, Izuku Kajinu. Title, Shadow Monarch. Level, HP, 5,000,000+. MP, 5,000,000+. Strength, 1,000+. Agility, 500+. Stamina, 999+. Intelligence, Sense, 500+. Physical damage reduction, 90%. Magical damage reduction, 80%. Skills included Bloodlust, Quicksilver, Shadow Manipulation, Elemental Manipulation, Weapon Creation, Shadow Extraction, and Monarch Domain. These were Izuku's stats after receiving Ashbourne's power. He knew he had become overwhelmingly powerful. He thought to himself that he was absurdly strong. They reached the house and Ei stared in amazement. She exclaimed that it looked amazing, and Izuku agreed. He reflected that thanks to Ashbourne's money they had somewhere to live now, otherwise they would have been homeless. Izuku then suggested they go inside, and Ei agreed. When she used the nickname Aizu, Izuku paused and blushed slightly. Ei explained that it was a nickname she liked, and Izuku told her he liked it too. She smiled warmly, and they stepped into the house together. Inside, they were both impressed by the place. Izuku noticed Ei's interest and asked if she was hungry. She agreed, so Izuku went to the kitchen to prepare a meal. He had learned to cook for himself after a difficult childhood, and he set about making something delicious. When the food was ready, he brought it to the table and placed it down with a warm smile, hoping she would enjoy it. Ei looked at the food in amazement and began to eat. She enjoyed the meal, and Izuku ate his own plate while feeling content to see her smile. He thought that he wanted to see that smile for the rest of his life. Afterward, I went to bed and Izuku was about to follow, tired from the day. He suddenly sensed a familiar presence and went outside to investigate. A red portal opened, and a man with long red hair and armor stepped out. The newcomer looked down at Izuku with his hands clasped behind his back. He observed that this was the successor of Ashbourne. Izuku was stunned. He recognized the man from memories he had seen of Ashbourne and immediately identified him as Antares, Monarch of Destruction. Izuku reacted loudly at the sight. naming Antares and accusing him of appearing here. Antares acknowledged that Izuku knew who he was. He floated down as he and Izuku faced each other, their gazes cold and locked in a tense standoff. Antares explained that he had come to see Ashbourne's successor and that he intended to kill Izuku, take his powers, and become the strongest being in existence. Izuku bristled. A dark, intense aura gathered around him, and the air tightened with menace. Izuku challenged Antares, insisting that he would fail as those who had come before had failed. Antares responded that he liked Izuku's confidence but wondered if he could back it up. Izuku affirmed that he kept his promises and that his word was absolute, his eyes glowing with purple power. Antares smirked, touched Izuku's face, and replied that only time would tell, that he could not wait for the day he destroyed the Shadow Monarch. Then Antares vanished in a teleportation, leaving Izuku alone to think. Izuku recognized that Antares was the only monarch currently in this world and suspected the others were in different dimensions. He activated the system and received confirmation that he could train and level up in the shadow dungeon Ashbourne had created for him, which would help him gain full control of his powers. Izuku resolved to train, vowing to kill Antares and any monarchs who stood against him, to keep moving forward until all his enemies were defeated, and to protect his world as the duty of the Shadow Monarch. He hoped Ashbourne was watching, certain that he would make him proud. He readied himself for what lay ahead and prepared to begin the hunt. 10 years later, Izuku's life had changed for the better. He had mastered his Shadow Monarch powers and abilities, and he and Ei had fallen in love and married at 18. He trained Ei and helped her master her quirk as well. Together they founded Kajanu Industries, a company that specialized in new technology and operated luxury hotels and malls around the world. They became very wealthy. A flashback revealed what had happened to Izuku's family 10 years earlier. The Yagi household was preparing to celebrate Izumi's birthday and had invited many guests, including Class 1A and their parents, Todoroki and Bakugo's families, Izuku's uncle and aunt, and the grandparents. Gran Torino noticed that Izuku was not present and asked All Might where his grandson was. Gran Torino spoke oddly about changing Izuku's appearance and demeanor, comparing him to a commanding figure and imagining different powers, which made everyone stare in surprise. Inko said that Izuku had said he was not feeling well and would not attend the party. Gran Torino decided to check on him. Gran Torino went upstairs to Izuku's room, knocked, and when there was no answer he opened the unlocked door. Inside, he found an empty room with a single mattress and discarded, stained bandages on the floor. He felt a cold shock at the sight and noticed a letter on the mattress. As he read, his expression hardened. The letter explained that Izuku had run away from the family home, that he felt neglected and mistreated compared to his sister, and that he had only wanted a loving family. He said he would never forgive them, that he hated them, and that he disowned the Yagi name. He wrote that the others were, to him, dead and asked his grandparents to take care of themselves until they met again. The letter was signed Izuku. Furious and pained, Gran Torino went downstairs and confronted the gathering. He marched straight to All Might, his temper flaring, and struck him in a violent, cinematic outburst that sent All Might crashing into the wall in an explosive, anime-style moment. The stunned guests reacted in shock and confusion. Inko began to speak, but Gran Torino cut her off with an abrupt command for silence, his voice shaking with anger. Recovery Girl stepped forward and asked what had happened. Gran Torino then handed her the letter so everyone could understand what had driven Izuku away. She read the recordings aloud, and everyone in the room was stunned. He then led them to Izuku's room and played footage documenting the abuse, neglect, and bullying that had been inflicted on him. The parents were shocked by the extent of what their children had done. They had not known. Nizu handed down punishments, and the families and siblings of the offenders withdrew from them. The guilty students searched for Izuku but could not find him. Inko and the others cried every day, hoping he would return, but he never did. The boys who had tormented him insisted he was to blame and vowed revenge. His uncle, aunt, and grandparents hoped he was all right and looked forward to seeing him again, unaware that he would not be the same person they remembered. Years later, Izuku stood in the rain on the roof of a tall building, looking out over the city. He wore a somber, determined expression as he reflected that 10 years had passed and the monarchs had not taken decisive action against him. So far, only the Iron Body, Demon, and Transfiguration monarchs had tried to attack him. Before he could finish them, they had escaped. He wondered what Antares was planning, unsettled by the unusual silence. He called for Bellion. Izuku's shadow extended, and his strongest soldier, the Grand Marshal of his shadow army, emerged and stood at his side. Bellion responded with deference and offered an honest opinion when Izuku asked whether he would win if he confronted the remaining monarchs now. Bellion assured him without hesitation that Izuku was stronger than them all combined and would prevail. Pleased, Izuku thanked him and sent Bellion back into the shadows. Thinking of home, Izuku decided it was time to return before his wife grew angry at his lateness. She could be formidable when upset. He used his shadow exchange, and in an instant he was back at his mansion. Inside, his wife was in the kitchen preparing dinner. Izuku had taught her to cook. Dai greeted him warmly. He gave her a brief, affectionate kiss and smiled at her. Dai urged him to freshen up, having set the meal on the table for him after what she imagined had been a long day. He agreed and took a shower, changed clothes, and returned to find dinner ready. They ate together, enjoying the meal and each other's company. During dinner, Ei mentioned that a company called Yaoyorozu had expressed interest in a business partnership and sought sponsorship. Izuku considered the proposal and decided they should strike a deal. Ei hesitated, worried about past issues connected to that family, but Izuku reassured her that he trusted the people involved and felt no lingering resentment. They finished eating and, tired from the day, went to their bedroom. They embraced and fell asleep with comfort and closeness between them. The next morning Izuku prepared breakfast for the two of them. Ai praised the meal and he smiled at her. He suggested they visit his grandparents. He had not seen them in 10 years and missed them. He admitted he expected his grandmother to be strict and imposing, which made him nervous, and Ai laughed softly at his unease. They finished breakfast, dressed in formal clothes, and left together. In the garage, Izuku smiled at his collection of sports and luxury cars, speaking to them with fond amusement. Ai teased him in response, and he called her his queen, making her blush. They exchanged gentle words of affection before heading out. They set off to visit his grandparents. The day moved forward with the quiet weight of the past pressing on Izuku, and the trip offered a chance to confront what he had left behind. Izuku took one of his sports cars and drove to his grandparents' house with his wife, Ei. They arrived outside the gates and were both impressed by the property. Izuku expressed his astonishment. Izuku did not know they had a house like this. Ei said she was actually surprised. It was simple yet beautiful. This was their house. Izuku felt nervous about meeting his grandmother, who had a reputation for being strict. Ei reassured him that they would be welcomed. Izuku accepted her reassurance but privately hoped his grandmother would not be too harsh, thinking he was far too young for any serious trouble. Outside UA Academy, they were dressed for the visit. Izuku reflected that after 10 years his chances of running into certain people were almost certain, and he sighed. Ei encouraged him to ignore them and focus on the reason they had come. Izuku reminded her that she had persuaded him to come and that he had been reluctant at first. Ei laughed softly and told him it would not be that bad. Izuku sighed and conceded that she was probably right. He smiled and she smiled back. Izuku affectionately suggested they get going, and Ei agreed. They turned their attention to UA Academy, both ready to face what awaited them. It was much less grand than Izuku had imagined. Izuku and Ei walked past the gates of UA toward the exam hall. Time skipped to the briefing. In the exam hall, President Mike was explaining the rules and procedures for the combat test against the robots. Suddenly, the heavy doors at the top of the lecture theater burst open, and everyone turned to see who had interrupted. President Mike apologized that they were late and that the first half of the briefing was already over. Izuku told President Mike to get on with it. Ei apologized for the interruption and explained that they already understood the briefing. When President Mike asked how they knew, Izuku introduced himself as Izuku Kajino. President Mike accepted them and told them to sit. Izuku and Ei took seats and Izuku closed his eyes to sense his surroundings. Those who knew his past were stunned at how much he had changed, that he could walk into a hall full of students and act as though he owned the place. Present Mike resumed the explanation until a student resembling Sonic interrupted. Ida tried to protest in his usual formal manner. Many students wanted to laugh at the interruption, but Izuku flared a little of his aura, and the examinees fell silent with unease. EI was unaffected, having been trained to handle Izuku's presence. Izuku warned the student resembling Sonic to stop or face serious consequences. Ida trembled with fear. Present Mike attempted to calm everyone. Class 1A reacted in stunned disbelief. Outside the gates, Izuku told EI that if he scored more points than she did, she would buy him ice cream. EI smiled and agreed. When the gates opened, they ran through at incredible speed, leaving a small crater and a shockwave behind them. Some onlookers complained that Izuku and EI were cheating. Present Mike reminded everyone that there was no countdown in a real battle and urged them on. The students surged inside, only to find that half the robots had already been destroyed. In the observation room, the teachers watched the exam closely. Midnight noted how many talented students there were. All Might laughed and said that the future was in good hands. Gran Torino muttered something bitter about the symbol of peace, and he confessed inwardly that he wanted to confront those responsible for what had been done to Izuku, though he restrained himself. Nizu asked Aizawa if any of the students had caught his attention. Aizawa directed Nizu's attention to a boy with black hair and a girl with purple hair. Nizu zoomed in on Izuku and EI and watched them destroy robots at an astonishing rate. The pro-heroes were shocked by how quickly the robots fell to their attacks. Aizawa asked for their names. Nizu checked their files and revealed that their names were Izuku and EI Kajinu. Inko, seeing the broadcast, cried out that she had finally found her child, tears in her eyes. All Might reacted emotionally as well. Gran Torino and Recovery Girl objected to anyone calling him their baby boy, given what had happened to him. Aizawa suggested releasing the zero-pointer to test Izuku and EI further. Nizu obliged and, with a laugh, activated the zero-pointer. The room buzzed with surprised remarks. The zero-pointer engaged, but Izuku only smirked and moved like a blur toward it. The robot fired laser beams, but Izuku used the remnants of other robots as a shield to protect his outfit. He leaped high toward the zero-pointer, his eyes glowing with energy. He covered his hand in shadowy power, a sleeve tearing as he struck. The punch sent the zero-pointer flying far away, and the impact produced a powerful shockwave that shook the ground. Everyone watched in stunned silence at the display of strength. Izuku expressed his disappointment at what UA had put forward. He walked back toward the gate and waited for EI. When she arrived, they shared a quiet, affectionate moment and smiled at one another. They were about to leave when someone called Izuku's name. Izuku's expression hardened. A purple aura surrounded him and his gaze turned icy. He asked what Inko Yagi wanted. Outside the UA gates, Izuku glared at the woman he hated most. Inko flinched when he spoke to her so harshly. She reached out, calling him her child and attempting to hug him, but he stepped aside and she stumbled and fell. Izuku demanded who she thought she was. She insisted that she was his mother. All Might and the rest of Class 1A arrived on the scene. All Might addressed Izuku as his boy, but Izuku shouted for him to be quiet, surprising everyone with the intensity of his voice. Izumi stepped forward and pleaded for Izuku to come back so they could be a family again, promising to take care of him. A tense silence followed as the confrontation hung unresolved. A short neutral pause bridged the moment until the next events could unfold. Several family members and classmates called to Izuku, but he barely acknowledged them. His wife EI responded with gentle concern and a soft nickname as she moved closer. Class 1A's girls watched on, stunned and unsure. Izuku nodded at his wife. EI's worry turned to anger as she prepared to confront the group, but Izuku embraced her from behind and rested his head on her shoulder to calm her. He asked her to remain calm, and she relaxed, smiling with affection. The girls felt a pang of heartbreak. Izuku looked back at his family and former classmates with a hard, serious expression and released a cold, dangerous aura. He asked why they were there and demanded an explanation for the third time. His stare, filled with barely contained fury, made them visibly frightened. The Yagi family said that they had come to apologize and to try to be a family again. Izuku laughed suddenly, a sound that made everyone uneasy. I grew worried. She had never heard him laugh like that before. The laugh sent chills through the room. He stopped laughing and glared at his past, the humor turning sharp and bitter. Izuku told them that it was funny, that they were shameless. When they asked why he felt this way, he asked where they had been when he needed them the most. All Might and Inko looked down, eyes wet. Katsuki interjected, insisting that they were trying to apologize. Izuku snapped for silence, his demeanor darkening further. He told them to seek forgiveness in their own way but warned them not to interrupt him. His presence now radiated a lethal intensity that unsettled even the nearby monarchs. Antares noted aloud that the Shadow Monarch appeared to be enraged, and the other monarchs remarked on how extreme the killing intent seemed. Izuku glared at his family and warned them not to interrupt him or else face dire consequences. Other heroes and his grandparents rushed outside, reacting to the dangerous aura he projected. Grandfather and grandmother called to him with concern. Aizawa wondered how someone could display such intent. The girls from Class 1A pleaded, begging him to come back and declaring their love, but Izuku said he no longer cared about their affection. He announced that he already had a wife, Ei Kajinu, and that she was his whole world. He pulled Ei close. She smiled back warmly and affirmed that she was his wife and that their old classmates had lost their chance the moment they had begun to bully him. The girls began to cry at the revelation. Izuku told his mother to leave him alone because he was no longer a part of the Yagi family. When Inko protested, he coldly said he no longer felt anything for her, that her existence meant nothing to him. He added that her death would not affect him. The words shocked Inko. She had not expected such detachment from her son. Izumi pleaded that they could be a happy family again. Izuku reacted angrily and grabbed her arm to restrain her, glaring harshly. He demanded to know where she had been when he suffered neglect and abuse for lacking what others had. He told them never to apologize, warning that they would regret it. To underscore the threat, he took out a dagger and pointed it in their direction, his eyes full of hatred. The girls wept at the sight. Izuku told his grandfather and grandmother that he would see them at UA on Monday. They replied for him to visit soon. He smiled warmly at them, promised he would come, and said it was time to leave with Ei. Ei agreed. He drew Ei close and then used Shadow Exchange to teleport them away. Their departure left Izuku's past to grapple with guilt and shock, while Katsuki seethed at Izuku's sudden growth in power. Grandfather suggested to Nizu that Izuku be placed in Class 1B. Nizu agreed immediately. Later, Izuku and Ei arrived home. I asked if he was okay. Izuku said he was simply tired. Ei suggested they eat and rest. She prepared dinner for them both and announced the meal was ready. They ate together. Afterwards they cleaned up separately and went to bed. Before sleep, Izuku and Ei exchanged warm, affectionate words and embraced. They fell asleep comforted by one another. The next morning, Izuku and Ei arrived at UA Academy for their first day. They walked toward the entrance and agreed to check with Nizu about which class they would be assigned to. Izuku joked about his uncle with a teasing nickname, and Ei sighed but let him be. As they approached the main hall, they saw Momo standing nearby. Izuku's gaze hardened and he glared coldly at her, his discomfort obvious. Izuku slammed into the room with a cold edge in his voice and an aura that made the others uneasy. He demanded that Momo speak, and the intensity of his presence frightened her. Momo stammered that she only wanted to apologize and ask him to come back because they missed him. Izuku laughed in a sharp, hollow way and told them that he would not be coming back. He explained that he no longer felt the same for them and that his life was with his wife, Ai, who meant everything to him. Momo began to cry, but before she could finish, Ei intervened. Ai struck a powerful gust of wind that sent Momo stumbling to the ground. Ai stood calm and serious, her eyes glowing with purple power, and declared that they should give up because Izuku would never return to them. He loved only Ei. Izuku and Ei then turned and left, and a few of Izuku's shadowy companions exchanged worried whispers about how frightening Ei could be and how lucky they were to stay clear of her temper. One added that Ei's presence was the reason Baru stayed hidden and Weiber often spoke out of line. Later, Izuku and Ei arrived at Principal Nizu's office and knocked. Nizu invited them in and greeted them warmly, pleased to see his favorite nephew and his beautiful wife. Izuku asked which class they had been placed in, and Nizu replied that they had been put in Class 1B because Class 1A contained some students they would rather avoid. Nizu smiled with a hint of mischief and thought the coming year would be exciting. They made their way to Class 1B and found it calm and quiet. The class welcomed them, and they spent some time talking and getting to know one another. Vlad King then entered the room and asked the class to settle down. He introduced himself as their teacher for the coming years, and the students responded enthusiastically. The class listened to Nizu's welcome speech and continued to bond. At lunch, Kendo invited everyone to eat together, and the class gathered around one table. Yui asked why Izuku and Ei shared the same surname and wondered if they were siblings. Ei answered that they were married, which caused surprise and chatter among the students. Izuku chuckled and acknowledged it. When Class 1A entered the cafeteria, Izuku's expression darkened. Kinoko asked him why he got so upset when he saw Class 1A, and the other students turned their attention to him. Izuku sighed and then explained the painful parts of his past, recounting how he had been mistreated and neglected. The class listened, shocked and sympathetic. Yui apologized and Kendo and Nito expressed anger at those who had hurt him. The rest of Class 1B pledged to support Izuku, and he smiled appreciatively. Meanwhile, in Class 1A, several students grumbled about Izuku being with Class 1B, and tension simmered. One of the students approached the table where Izuku and his friends sat, and insults were exchanged. Ei and Izuku both bristled at the taunts. The situation quickly escalated into a confrontation. Izuku rose to defend himself and his classmates. The encounter became a fast, anime-style clash. Bakugo launched explosive attacks that lit up the air, and Izuku moved with precise, determined counterattacks. The fight remained intense but non-graphic, more like a high-energy duel than a brutal brawl. Izuku managed to deflect the blasts and land decisive strikes that sent his aggressors reeling. Several were knocked back and stunned rather than seriously harmed. After the confrontation, Izuku and Class 1B left the cafeteria, leaving Class 1A to reflect on their actions and feel guilty. The students later took a ball-throwing test during class. Izuku finished first and Ei came in second. When the day ended, Izuku and Ei prepared to head home, but Inko stopped them in the hallway and pleaded with Izuku to come back. All Might arrived as well, joining Inko in asking for their son to return home. Izuku responded with restrained fury, confronting his mother and All Might about the neglect and the abuse he had endured. He reminded them that when he needed a mother's love, no one had been there. When he came home hungry and bruised, no one had truly cared. He asked where they had been when he asked for help. All Might began to speak, but his words were cut off. A tense silence settled over the small group. Izuku and Ei left after a bitter confrontation, and Inko was left standing alone, tears on her face. Classroom quiet returned, and Izuku privately noted how boring the day felt and how Antares still had not made a move. He wondered what was being planned. The system responded to him, acknowledging his command. The system then displayed his status: Izuku Kajinu, level unreadable, job Shadow Monarch, title the one who overcomes adversity, with no fatigue and unreadable HP and MP. His physical damage reduction was 90% and magical damage reduction was complete. Izuku reviewed his skills, seeing a list of passive abilities such as will to recover, longevity, detoxification, tenacity, advanced dagger arts, and mana creation, and active skills including stealth, bloodlust, quicksilver dagger rush, dragon fear, roar of the god, ruler's authority, weapon creation, and more. He considered how much stronger he had become and thought it might be a good day to train with Ei. I asked if he was all right, and Izuku replied that he was just bored. They shared a quiet, playful moment, each relieved by the other's presence and hoping for something to break the monotony. The intercom summoned them to Nizu's office. Nizu asked them to come in, and they complied, sensing trouble. In the office, Izuku saw familiar faces from his past, his grandparents, Aizawa, and others. Nizu explained that the group had been pestering him and asked Izuku to intervene and get them to leave. Izuku agreed, then turned toward his family and asked what they wanted. Inko began to speak, but the exchange quickly grew heated. A relative struck Inko, leaving her doubled over and distraught. The argument escalated as accusations and old resentments resurfaced. Ai, angered at the disrespect shown, struck back and defended her partner. Izuku moved to stop the agitation and, in the course of the scuffle, he acted decisively to protect Ei and to silence the insults, enough to send one of the aggressors reeling. Class 1B members arrived, worried about Izuku and Ei. Ei explained that they were fine and appreciated the concern. The students exchanged banter and teasing remarks, some light-hearted and some sharper, but the tension eased as friends rallied around them. Nizu, seeing the situation resolved for the moment, proposed a challenge, Izuku and Ei versus Class 1A, with all might and others observing. Bets were placed quietly among faculty and students. Some sided with Izuku and Ei, others with Class 1A. The observation room filled with murmurs of anticipation. Before the match, Izuku and Ei prepared in their hero gear. Some of the students blushed at Izuku's imposing appearance, and Ei exchanged a confident smile with him. Class 1A took their positions, determined to bring Izuku back into the fold, while Izuku was adamant about maintaining his independence and refusing to be controlled. Nizu announced that the match would begin inside the simulated city. The teams entered the arena, and everyone settled into their roles as combatants or observers. Bets were still murmured in the observation room, with confident and worried voices on both sides. As the battle was about to begin, Izuku kept his focus on Ei and their plan. He exchanged a quiet, supportive glance with her, promising they would face whatever came together. The arena grew tense, and the match commenced. The command to attack echoed across the training ground. Izuku and Ei charged into the fray together. Ei moved with blinding speed. Mina launched an acidic attack, but Ei slipped between Tsuyu and Mina and kicked, sending both girls tumbling and unconscious. Ei landed lightly and asked who was next. Everyone watched her with stunned silence. Nizu mused that if Ei were a villain, they would be in serious trouble. Back on the field, Shoko retaliated with a burst of flame, but Ei flipped away and taunted that their attacks were weak. Katsumi closed in with explosive strikes, but Ei dodged rhythmically until she landed a precise blow to Katsumi's side that left her reeling and then unconscious. Izumi cried out for Katsumi. Inko hurled boulders, and Ei produced a blade and shattered them as they flew. Toru attempted a stealth approach, but Ei sensed her and knocked her out with a quick counter. Only Shoko, Katsumi, Izumi, Momo, and Inko remained standing. Inko wondered aloud how Ei could be so strong. Izumi reminded everyone that they had to win to bring Izuku back. Before Shoko could finish, Ei reappeared and struck Shoko with a palm crackling with lightning, sending Shoko flying and out of the fight. Ei laughed and said she was having fun. Momo formed a sword, but Ei evaded and delivered a rapid combo that rendered her unconscious. Katsumi unleashed a massive explosion and shrouded the area in smoke. When the haze cleared, everyone was shocked to see the explosion had not stopped Ei. She berated them for failing to entertain her. The air grew heavy and cold as Ei's expression turned serious. She declared playtime was over, and the change unsettled everyone. Izumi activated her quirk and pushed her power to its limit. Ei vanished and then appeared before Katsumi, striking decisively and putting her out of the fight. Inko attempted to restrain Ei with telekinetic force, but Ei slipped free. Izumi launched a desperate attack and was knocked back into a building. Ei performed a spinning evasion and then engaged Izumi in a tense hand-to-hand exchange. Ei drew her sword, infused it with energy, and delivered a decisive slash that rendered Izumi unconscious. Ei landed and, after a brief satisfied smile, teleported away to observe Izuku's battle. In the observation room, the assembled teachers and students were silent. Nizu remarked that if Ei had been a villain, no one present would have had the power to stop her. Class 1B acknowledged that Ei's strength had surpassed their expectations. Endeavor allowed himself a wistful comment about strength and lineage, which drew a playful rebuke from a nearby teacher who warned him that his plans would not succeed. Aizawa exhaled in relief that Ei fought on their side. Meanwhile, the girls who had been defeated were taken to Recovery Girl for treatment. High above the city, Izuku stood on a rooftop with Ei. Izuku praised Ei's performance, and Ei responded with a warm smile. They shared a brief, quiet moment together before the scene was interrupted by Bakugo loudly calling Izuku's name. Bakugo demanded to know where Izuku was standing. Shoto suggested Izuku had probably retreated. Izuku spoke down from the rooftop, dismissing them as opponents beneath his level. The remark angered the others. All Might tried to calm the situation, but Izuku answered sharply. Shiro protested at Izuku's tone, and Ida sternly instructed him to stand down and stop fueling the conflict. Katsuki, enraged, announced in violent terms that he intended to take the issue further. Tension built on both sides as old rivalries and new dangers converged, the night air charged with the promise of an escalating confrontation. A tense confrontation unfolded on the rooftop. Kirishima warned that it was either Izuku came back or they would take him by force. Izuku jumped off the roof, landed, and began to walk toward them. The air around him grew heavy with pressure and forced everyone to their knees except Ei, who had been trained to handle his aura. Baru, watching from within Izuku's shadow, thought the king was enraged. Bellion observed that they had invited their own doom with that challenge. Igris predicted that Izuku would tear them apart. A terrifying surge of power radiated from Izuku, and everyone gasped for air. Izuku had intended to break a few bones, but his anger had hardened into a darker resolution. He declared that he would end them all. In the observation room, everyone trembled. Aizawa stammered in disbelief. Midnight said she had never felt anything like this, and Snipe muttered that Izuku seemed like a monster. On the field, Izuku challenged them to come and face him. Bakugo rushed forward recklessly and shouted at him before firing an explosion. Smoke filled the area, but Izuku stepped out of it unscathed. He disappeared and reappeared in front of Bakugo, then struck him with a brutal, non-graphic blow that knocked him unconscious. Shoto launched a fire blast at Izuku, who calmly intercepted it with his bare hand, snuffing the attack. He then hurled Bakugo aside, slamming him against a wall, and used an assertive technique to pull Shoto in before striking him with a rapid combo that left him collapsed against the wall. All Might arrived behind Izuku to intervene, but Izuku had already anticipated him. He seized All Might's arm and twisted it, fracturing it, then delivered a forceful strike to All Might's midsection that left the veteran reeling. Izuku grabbed All Might's leg and threw him with overwhelming force. Ida began to call out but was cut off when Izuku appeared in front of him and brought him down with a powerful strike. Kirishima, Shiro, and Ojiro rushed in together, and Izuku used close-quarters combat to send all three flying and unconscious. Sato tried to land a punch. Izuku evaded and countered, leaving Sato incapacitated. The remaining students swarmed, but they were overwhelmed and one by one left unconscious. Some later stirred to their feet, barely able to stand. Shiro wondered aloud how Izuku could be so strong. Tokoyami noted that even Dark Shadow seemed afraid to appear. Bakugo, stunned, questioned how Izuku could possibly be stronger than him. Izuku observed that they were still standing and announced that it was time to end the conflict. He charged a powerful attack and unleashed it as a concentrated blast that knocked the rest of them unconscious. Seeing All Might struggling to rise, Izuku formed a purple blade of energy and rushed him with blinding speed, striking from multiple angles until All Might was overwhelmed and collapsed, badly wounded and unable to continue. Izuku dismissed them all as pathetic and began to walk away. In the observation room, stunned silence reigned. Nizu broke the quiet by ordering everyone to take the injured to Recovery Girl. The staff moved quickly and carried the wounded to medical care. As Izuku and Ei prepared to leave, Aizawa stepped forward and placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder to restrain him. Izuku fixed him with a chilling glare and warned Aizawa to remove his hand or face severe consequences. Shaken, Aizawa withdrew. Grand Torino, who had been watching, nodded in acknowledgement, and Izuku used Shadow Exchange to teleport away with Ei. Aizawa stood pale and breathless, feeling as if he had witnessed something akin to death itself. Later, Izuku and Ei arrived home. They watched a movie together, shared dinner, and slept. The next morning in his mansion, Izuku woke to find Ei absent from the bed. He discovered a note explaining that the office had called and EI had to meet new shareholders. Breakfast was waiting in the kitchen and she would see him at the office. Amused by the note from his wife, Izuku decided to start the day with a workout. He spent 3 hours exercising and weightlifting, then took a shower and freshened up. In the kitchen he found the large breakfast EI had prepared and ate until he was satisfied. Izuku summoned his 3 strongest shadows, Bellion, Igris, and Bar. They appeared promptly and reported their findings. Bellion and Igris confirmed that they had gathered information about the Monarchs. Baru explained that the Monarchs had taken over the LOV and were helping create monsters capable of rivaling All Might. When Izuku asked where their base was, Baru said they had located it but the Monarchs were not present there. Bellion began to give further details about the location, and they prepared to act on the information soon. At a bar near the Kamino ward, Izuku thanked his soldiers and asked if there was anything else to report. Igris informed him that All for One had been given a new body, an upgraded quirk, and that the League had created new creatures called Nomu, which could rival All Might in his prime. Bellion added that there were more creations, but they had been unable to learn any further details. Izuku praised their work and told them to continue training in other parts of the world until he needed them again. Baru asked whether they planned to attack the League's base, and Izuku decided to let the enemy finish whatever they were doing so he could see how strong the creatures were. The 3 soldiers returned to the shadows at his command. Izuku then went to the garage to choose a car. He settled on a large, powerful vehicle and drove it to his company. He parked outside, entered the building, and his employees greeted him. When he asked after EI, they told him she was in his office. In his office, EI sat on the table reading files. She rose to greet him and gave him a quick kiss, which he returned, then they broke apart. When Izuku asked if she was finished with work, she said she was. He suggested they go see a movie together, and she agreed. As they were making plans, Izuku's phone rang. The caller was his grandfather, Grand Torino. Grand Torino asked why Izuku was not at school. Izuku explained he had been busy and asked if something was wrong. Grand Torino told him that the parents of Class 1A had come to the school demanding that Izuku be expelled, claiming he had almost killed their children. Izuku said he would be there soon, ended the call and sighed. I asked what had been said. Izuku explained that the parents were demanding his removal from UA. Tai offered to come, but he told her to go home and rest. They shared a brief kiss, and Izuku left for UA. At UA Academy, Izuku parked and sent a message to his grandfather asking where to meet. Grand Torino replied that he was in Principal Nizu's office. Izuku went there and found his grandparents, school staff, several people with bandages, the parents who had come to complain, and students of Class 1B. Principal Nizu asked Izuku to sit and explained that the parents wanted him expelled. Izuku turned to the assembled parents and asked why they believed he had done anything deserving of expulsion. The room grew tense as the parents reacted emotionally, accusing him of nearly killing their children. Izuku met their outrage with a cold, controlled demeanor that surprised them. A mother accused him loudly of almost killing their kids. Izuku asked how that made it his problem. A father challenged him on his shame. Izuku replied that he felt no shame. Another parent demanded to know why his daughter had been hurt. Izuku firmly denied being responsible. This denial replaced an earlier vulgar remark he had made. He instead made a curt clarification that he had not hurt anyone. The situation escalated when a parent used a derogatory term for EI. Izuku reacted by stepping forward and grabbing the parent by the collar, his expression hard and commanding the room to fall silent. He issued a clear warning for the parent to stop insulting EI. The parent, frightened, nodded repeatedly, and Izuku released him and pushed him back without graphic violence. The tension in the room intensified. Several people backed away and dropped to their knees as they felt the pressure of Izuku's imposing presence. One student from his past tried to call him out, and Izuku responded with harsh words that cut deep, expressing anger and rejection toward that student's family. The words left the student in tears. Another attempted to speak but was interrupted by Izuku's furious outburst, which left the assembled families stunned and hurt. Katsuki moved to intervene, and Izuku reacted swiftly, delivering a decisive, non-graphic strike that rendered Katsuki unconscious. Izuku then told him that he did not want to hear his voice. Seeing the chaos and the emotional harm unfolding, Principal Nizu allowed Izuku to leave. As Izuku moved to depart, Momo, teary and pleading, asked him to come back. Izuku paused, looked at her, and refused, telling her not to return and not to show herself to him again. He left, leaving the group in shock and guilt. At home, Ai was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Izuku returned. She greeted him warmly. He said he would freshen up, then they ate dinner together, watched a movie, and cuddled. She asked what had happened at the school, and he told her about the confrontation. Ai promised she would do her best to keep others from approaching him in the future. Izuku chuckled and appreciated her support. They said goodnight to one another, shared a gentle kiss, and fell asleep in each other's arms. Arlecchino had been Ai's childhood friend. They had moved apart when they were 8, but Arlecchino had returned as a transfer student to UA Academy to become a hero. She met Ai and Izuku again, and as she grew closer to Izuku she began to develop deeper feelings for him. Ai, loyal to their history, agreed to share their friendship and support. Narration shifted to the breakfast table where Izuku and Ai were eating. Izuku commented that the food was delicious, and Ai thanked him. When Izuku noticed she had drifted into thought, he gently tapped her shoulder to get her attention and asked if she was all right. Ai admitted that she missed her childhood best friend. Izuku reassured her that she might see her soon, and Ai smiled and laughed softly at the idea. He teased that he was always right, and then reminded her to get ready for school because he needed to help his grandmother by delivering the healing potions he had promised. Izuku hurried to get ready and announced he was prepared. They walked to the garage together and debated which car to take. They settled on the new one and drove toward UA. When they parked at the school and were about to enter, Izuku noticed the girls from Class 1A waiting near the gate. Ai told him she would handle them. She gave him a brief, affectionate gesture before heading to class. The girls approached Izuku to apologize for their earlier behavior and asked him to forgive them and distance himself from Ai, promising they would make him happy. Izuku responded coldly that he was not interested and that their advances were unwelcome. His blunt words and dismissive tone hurt the girls. Mina began to cry and some classmates protested his harshness. Izuku made it clear that he did not have romantic feelings for them and left, despite Izumi's tearful plea for him to return. Izuku then went to his grandmother's office. He presented Recovery Girl with the healing potions he had promised and explained that the vial contained a powerful restorative substance capable of curing even severe ailments. Recovery Girl was surprised and asked where he had obtained such a thing. Izuku only smiled and called it a secret. He told her he had 5 doses and instructed her to reserve them for people with injuries beyond usual treatment. Recovery Girl thanked him and agreed not to tell anyone. Leaving the office, Izuku bumped into a new face in the hallway. He apologized and then paused, struck by how striking the newcomer looked. She told him she had bumped into him as well and introduced herself as Arlecchino, a transfer student from America. Izuku introduced himself as Izuku Kajino. The brief, polite exchange left both of them a little flustered. Izuku offered to escort her to class, since she was looking for Class 1B, and she agreed. When they arrived, it became clear to everyone that Arlecchino was Ai's childhood friend. The two girls reunited, and the class learned more about Arlecchino. When asked about her quirk, Arlecchino explained that she had 3 abilities: Crimson Moon Curse, weapon creation, and energy manipulation. The classmates reacted with surprise as she described how her powers worked. Vlad Koder announced that the students would be going to the USJ for training that day and instructed everyone to change into their hero suits. Most students complied, but Izuku declined to wear his hero suit, preferring his usual outfit and saying he would take his car to the USJ instead of the bus. The other students boarded the bus for the USJ while Izuku drove separately. At the USJ, the classes encountered a well-known visiting hero who greeted the students and explained the day's exercises. While the hero described the training setup, a portal unexpectedly opened. Simulated villains and creatures appeared from it, and the situation quickly escalated as an army of monstrous figures emerged. A group identifying themselves as the League of Villains stepped through the portal. The students were shocked, and Izuku's expression shifted to one of keen interest, He welcomed the challenge with a confident, determined smile. To be continued. Aizawa asked what the villains wanted. Tamura smirked wildly and made it clear that his goal was to kill All Might, the symbol of peace. Everyone's eyes widened, except for Izuku, who appeared calm on the outside while grinning with excitement inside. Izuku thought that the gathered enemies would make excellent additions to his future force. Tamura ordered Kurogiri to teleport them into the center of the larger-than-usual USJ, and Kurogiri complied. Aizawa immediately noticed their new position and realized they had been surrounded. He worried that the students were too frightened to fight. He scanned the group and found everyone tense except Izuku, Tai, and Arlecchino. Arlecchino expressed relief at finally having something to break her boredom. Ei welcomed the action. Vlad King and Aizawa then told the students to prepare for combat. Vlad King urged the students to get ready because they had no choice but to fight, and Aizawa granted them permission to use their quirks. Some students nodded and steeled themselves while others remained frozen. Ei and Arlecchino summoned their weapons. The Bakugo twins cracked small explosions on their hands. Just as everyone seemed to be preparing, Shigaraki announced a new obstacle and smiled wickedly. Tamura told Kurogiri to activate a barrier. Kurogiri acknowledged and activated a black field that spread across the USJ. Aizawa reacted with alarm. Tamura explained that the barrier would suppress the heroes' quirks while leaving the villains unaffected because they wore special rings to bypass it. Everyone reacted with shock at the new information, except Izuku, who was still excited by the challenge. Ei and Arlecchino shared skeptical remarks about the villains' planning, each noting that they had underestimated them. Tamura taunted the group, saying that with All Might absent they could have some fun. The monsters and Nomu roared, their presence radiating an intense threat that terrified most of the students. Izuku and Arlecchino remained composed in the face of it. Izuku noted that the enemies had strong auras and looked forward to adding them to his cause, thinking about how their defeat could strengthen his position. Ei observed Izuku's calm exterior and guessed that he was excited on the inside. Arlecchino echoed the question about why he seemed unbothered. Izuku noticed Arlecchino watching and responded with a small, playful gesture that made her blush. Baru contacted Izuku telepathically and asked if he intended to kill the attackers. Izuku replied that he would wait for the right moment. He instructed Baru to tell Bellion, Igris, Iron, Tusk, Tank, and a few soldiers to be ready for summoning soon. Baru confirmed and the telepathic link ended. Tamura asked what the heroes would do now. Mina panicked that they were going to die without their quirks. Mineta voiced a nervous protest, and Kirishima lightly rebuked him for panicking. Ejiro pointed out the poor timing. Yui criticized their claims of being heroes in training. Aizawa whispered a plan to 13 and Vlad King. They would attack Shigaraki, who seemed to be controlling the monsters. Vlad King and 13 agreed to join Aizawa. Izuku overheard and thought the plan would backfire. He did not believe anyone could stop the monsters the way they intended. Tamura suggested starting their fun in games. The monsters roared again, this time with an even heavier aura. Aizawa shouted for everyone to attack, but no one moved. Frustrated, Aizawa resolved to act himself and leaped toward Shigaraki. One of the Nomu intercepted Aizawa, grabbed him, and began to slam him into the ground repeatedly. The attack terrified the students, who could not bring themselves to move. Aizawa was overwhelmed and gravely injured, his condition looking dire as the Nomu threatened to finish him off. Suddenly, Aizawa vanished from the Nomu's grasp, and everyone gasped. He reappeared near the entrance of the USJ. It became clear that Izuku had moved faster than they had seen. Izuku reassured them that everyone was safe now. Tamura and Kurogiri were baffled by his speed. Tamura dismissed that mystery and declared that Izuku would still die. Izuku asked Aizawa for permission to deal with the attackers directly, explaining that he intended to remove the threat. Aizawa, exhausted and pleading, urged them to be saved. Izuku assured him that he would handle it. Izuku then struck, propelling a Nomu down and disabling it. The students were shocked by his ability and by the sudden turn of events. Izuku produced a healing item and applied it to Aizawa, who began to recover from his wounds. Izuku teleported the class near the entrance and then moved back into the middle of the room. Izumi started to speak, but Izuku's stern look quieted her. He focused on the villains and prepared to face them. He declared himself ready to take them on. Back with the villains, Arlecchino asked Ei whether she was worried about Izuku. Ei said she was not, confident that the fight would be easy for him. Later, from a narrator's point of view, Izuku stood in the center of the USJ surrounded by hundreds of monsters and Nomu, noting that there were quite a lot of them. A portal opened near Shigaraki and a man stepped through, radiating a powerful presence that frightened everyone except Ei, Arlecchino, and Izuku. The newcomer approached Shigaraki and asked about the hero's status. Shigaraki bowed on his knees before the mysterious figure and explained that they had been about to kill the heroes but were interrupted by Izuku. The figure turned toward Izuku. Izuku acknowledged the late arrival and greeted him with tense recognition. The presence of All for One on the steps caused many whose attention was drawn to freeze in shock. The newcomer reacted to Izuku's knowledge of him and of Antares with surprise and thinly veiled irritation, setting the stage for the confrontation to come. Someone in the enemy ranks shouted to kill everyone. Izuku responded coolly that such a claim was false and that they would lose to him. All for One answered by pointing out their numerical advantage, and Izuku challenged that advantage. The air around them grew heavy, and some of those present struggled to breathe. Izuku's eyes began to glow purple. Izuku commanded his shadows to arise, and the dark shapes extended from him. Everyone watched in stunned silence as his shadows revealed themselves. Mina asked what those things were, frightened. Tokoyami admitted he felt a deep darkness emanating from them. Arlecchino turned to Ei and asked the same question. Ei identified the summons as Izuku's, and Arlecchino noted how formidable they looked. Ei warned that they had no idea what that power might mean. Izuku summoned his Demon King daggers and addressed his shadow forces, blaming his enemy's stubbornness and ignorance for provoking the fight. He then activated Monarch's domain. The system confirmed that the skill had been activated. He pointed a dagger at All for One and Tamura Shigaraki and ordered his shadows to show everyone who they were. Bellion acknowledged their liege and led the Shadow Army in a fierce charge. All for One ordered a simultaneous attack. The monsters surged forward and the two armies collided. Class 1A and 1B watched in shock, too stunned to speak. Izuku observed his soldiers in combat and felt proud of how they had grown. When a group of Nomu charged toward him, he dismissed them with swift precision, scattering them without gore. All for One sneered that Izuku was arrogant to take credit while his puppets did the work. Shigaraki noticed the shadow soldiers regenerating rapidly and questioned how long that advantage would last. Izuku tightened his grip on the dagger and retorted that All for One might not be around to see it. All for One scoffed at the idea of dying to a mere brat. Izuku replied that he would demonstrate exactly what his opponent was underestimating. Izuku looked over the fallen combatants and again commanded his power to arise. The bodies were swallowed by shadow and reformed as his forces. The crowd was shocked. None had seen such a transformation before. Izuku taunted that the fallen minions now belonged to him and hinted that his enemies would soon join them. All for One asked, apprehensive, who Izuku truly was. Izuku sheathed his daggers and summoned a new blade called Snowflower. He introduced himself to the astonished enemy as Izuku Kajinu, the god of darkness, ruler of the dead, the Shadow Monarch. He drew Snowflower, took a stance, and challenged them. The aura Izuku released caused visible fear in All for One and Shigaraki. Before they could react, Izuku appeared before Shigaraki and enveloped his sword in shadow energy, preparing to make a decisive strike. All for One managed to pull Shigaraki out of the path at the last moment, and All for One began to speak to his subordinate, but Izuku was already there. Izuku struck All for One with a powerful blow that sent him flying. Shigaraki cried out for his master. Izuku dismissed him, urging Shigaraki to focus on himself. Shigaraki tried to attack Izuku with the destructive energy in his hand, but Izuku dodged and countered, driving Shigaraki to the ground with a strike charged in lightning. All for One came at Izuku from behind with a sweeping slash, but Izuku avoided it and called the attack pathetic. He settled into a stance. A woman in purple appeared behind him as he unleashed shadow arts. Infinite Shadow Slash, a flurry of non-graphic, high-speed strikes that left all for one reeling and wounded. Shigaraki was hit in the ensuing chaos and suffered a severe arm injury that left him disabled on that side. Izuku then propelled him toward All for One. Izuku remarked that this could not be all for One had to offer. Enraged, All for One transformed Shigaraki into a strange orb-like form and absorbed him, emerging in a newly altered, more powerful state. All for One declared himself the god of quirks. Izuku smirked at the new development and noted that the fight would be entertaining. The combat paused briefly before resuming. All for One stood in his new form before Izuku. Izuku realized that All for One had indeed become something greater after absorbing Shigaraki's power. All for One taunted Izuku, insisting he could not defeat a god. Izuku questioned how certain All for One really was, and All for One answered with complete certainty. Izuku proposed they test that certainty. All for One agreed. Izuku ordered his shadows to evacuate the students. The Shadow Army moved the students out of the USJ area quickly and safely. The duel began at once. All for One rushed at Izuku at incredible speed, and Izuku met him head-on. Shockwaves rippled through the surroundings with every clash. All for One's punch missed as Izuku sidestepped and landed a kick to All for One's face, sending him back. All for One spat blood as he realized Izuku's strength. Izuku noted internally that he was only using a small fraction of his power. All for One launched a charged dark orb attack he called Dark Nebula. Izuku responded with his own attack, Hollow Purple 3, and the two energies collided in a massive, non-graphic explosion that drew attention from the watching students. Arlecchino and the others saw the explosion and worried about Izuku. Baru, standing beside Arlecchino and Ei, reassured them that their liege would be fine. When questioned, Baru and Ei confidently said it was because he was the strongest. As the smoke cleared, Izuku and All for One stood facing each other, both smirking. Izuku declared he was enjoying the fight. All for One admitted that this was the first real challenge he had encountered in a long time. They agreed to continue. They charged and traded blows at blistering speed. Izuku used a sudden maneuver to kick All for One upward, reappeared behind him, and drove him to the ground with a heavy strike. Izuku followed with a descending kick, which All for One narrowly avoided, earning Izuku a grin. Denki asked how Izuku had become so strong. Kirishima commented on how terrifying Izuku's fighting had become. Arlecchino watched Izuku intently, measuring his power. Arlecchino thought that he was not only attractive but also strong, kind, and caring, and she blushed as she realized she was falling in love. Lita then arrived with the heroes he had gone to fetch. They all took in the destruction around them and were shocked. Izumi begged her mother to help, saying that her brother was facing All for One by himself. Inko reacted with alarm. Izumi pointed to the sky, and they saw All for One and Izuku exchanging blows at incredible speed. Every hero present was stunned. Snipe admitted that the fight was too fast to follow. Gran Torino asked if it really was All for One. Ei confirmed that All for One had absorbed Shigaraki and taken on a new form. Gran Torino turned to All Might with a serious expression and demanded an explanation, reminding him that he had said All for One was dead. All Might could only say that he did not know. RG then glared at All Might and Inko, warning that if anything happened to Izuku she would hold them responsible, and her tone sent chills through everyone. Nizu urged calm and suggested they watch the fight and let Izuku handle it. The others nodded, though some of the girls hesitated until Ei and Arlecchino fixed them with stern looks, silencing their objections. In the sky, All for One launched a massive punch at Izuku. Izuku dodged and countered. The two traded blows at blurring speed. All for One taunted Izuku, who responded with confidence. All for One became enraged and tried a powerful kick, but Izuku blocked and struck him, forcing him back. Izuku then struck All for One with a forceful elbow that staggered him, sending him tumbling away. All for One roared with fury and prepared to strike again. All for One formed a weapon and charged, and Izuku drew Snow Flower from his inventory, meeting him head-on. They clashed in a rapid exchange, each attack met by an equal, precise reply. Izuku delivered a decisive kick, then channeled shadow energy into a crushing blow that sent All for One flying. Cracks of energy traced along All for One's form as Izuku pressed the attack. All for One realized the danger he was in and summoned multiple clones to overwhelm Izuku. Izuku grinned and began to dismantle the clones one by one with fluid, practiced motions. The heroes watching from below were stunned by Izuku's strength and his ability to handle multiple opponents at once. All for One found himself unable to keep up and started to panic, searching for an escape. Izuku gathered his power and unleashed a sweeping technique that destroyed the remaining clones. He then intercepted All for One as he tried to flee, striking him with a decisive blow that sent him collapsing as if defeated. Izuku approached the fallen figure and commanded him to rise. The body stirred and lifted, but its appearance had changed. Izuku gave the new form a name, Blaze. Blaze bowed deeply and pledged loyalty to Izuku, who accepted the pledge and expected great things from him. After the battle, the heroes were shaken by Izuku's display of power and pressed him for answers, but Izuku declined to explain his abilities. Nizu granted everyone a 3-week break. During that time, Arlecchino and Izuku grew closer. Arlecchino confessed her feelings, and Izuku accepted them. Ei also agreed to enter a shared romantic arrangement with Izuku, and the three became close in that way. The scene shifted to Izuku in his training room, where he exhaled tiredly and prepared to continue. At last, Izuku unlocked metavision. His eyes shifted into a puzzle piece pattern. He wiped sweat from his brow and thought that this would be a useful addition to his arsenal, though he planned to test it only after a gym session. He trained hard at the gym, lifting weights and running drills. Arlecchino arrived and greeted him warmly. Izuku returned the greeting and asked if she needed anything. Arlecchino explained that she had come to check on him because he had not been in bed. I was asleep. She told him she would make breakfast and would call when it was ready. Izuku finished his workout and headed home. Izuku closed his eyes and entered metavision again. He summoned his shadow commanders and instructed them to attack as part of a training exercise. They hesitated until he clarified it was only training. He practiced with his shadows until he had a firm command of the new ability. Once he was satisfied, he dismissed the shadows and they returned to him. Arlecchino called him for breakfast. He found Ai at the table, looking tired, and greeted her with concern. Arlecchino brought the meal they all shared, and the three of them ate together and enjoyed the food. They all freshened up and prepared for the day separately. While they were getting ready, Izuku's phone rang. Nizu introduced himself on the line and asked if Izuku would be coming to school. Nizu explained that All Might and Green Storm had been pestering him and wanted to speak with Izuku. Izuku sighed and told Nizu that he did not intend to explain anything about the USJ incident at that time. Nizu asked him to come to the office to discuss it, emphasizing the need to understand his powers. Izuku refused to reveal details, saying he might explain someday but not now. Nizu accepted that and said he would see him at school. The call ended. Izuku asked Arlecchino and Ei if they were ready. Both said they were. Tusk complimented Izuku's appearance, and Izuku returned the compliment to his companions, making them smile. The trio decided to travel on Kaisel. Izuku extended his shadow and summoned a black and purple wyvern, which lowered its head as he patted it. Kaisel seemed pleased and carried them toward UA Academy. People below spotted the wyvern and began taking pictures. At Nizu was working in his office when an alarm informed him that something large was approaching. He ordered all pro heroes to report outside. The pro heroes in classes 1A and 1B gathered to see what the threat was. Aizawa asked if it was a dragon, and Nizu corrected him that it was a wyvern. Kaisel landed and the students were surprised to see Izuku, Ai, and Arlecchino atop it. Izuku dismissed Kaisel back into his shadow and explained that the wyvern was one of his allies. Nizu asked for clarification and Izuku identified Nizu casually as an ally by nickname. Nizu led everyone back inside to make an announcement. Dorm assignments would be arranged, and the sports festival would be held in 2 weeks. Izuku requested a dorm of his own to share with Ei and Arlecchino, and Nizu agreed. Some girls from Class 1A then approached, asking to room with Izuku. Izuku refused emphatically and told them he preferred not to share a dorm with them. The exchange escalated when Izumi proposed a wager. If their team won the sports festival, Izuku would return to her and end his relationship with his partners. Izuku reacted angrily and grabbed Izumi to warn her not to speak of his partners that way. All Might stepped forward to intervene. Izuku pushed him aside in the heat of the moment, and Izumi fell to the floor. The argument ended with Izumi accepting the bet. Izuku smirked and wished them luck, confident they would need it. After the confrontation, Inko, All Might, and Class 1A left. Izuku, EI, and Arlecchino turned their attention to Class 1B. Izuku told the students they would train with him. EI reminded them to prepare themselves, and Arlecchino warned that their comfortable days were over. The trio exchanged determined looks and prepared to begin training. Class 1B moved into their dorms, with Izuku, EI, and Arlecchino's room located on the top floor. The next morning, Izuku woke feeling refreshed and prepared breakfast for his classmates and companions. He and the others woke the class, and everyone enjoyed the meal together. Later, at the training grounds, Izuku gathered Class 1B and announced that today they would train to get ready for the sports festival. During the sports festival, Testedisu asked Izuku whether they really needed training. Izuku answered that they did because they were weak. I said they would make them stronger. Arlecchino made a thoughtless insult and the girls of Class 1B felt hurt. Izuku then explained the plan. The girls would train with EI and Arlecchino while the boys trained with him. EI and Arlecchino looked at the girls with serious faces and warned that they would not go easy, which sent shivers down the girls' spines. Izuku promised to transform their weak selves into beasts that day. The girls moved to their side of the training grounds and the boys to theirs. Izuku told the boys he would test their current strength and that they should not hold back. He reassured them he would hold back himself and set the condition that if any of them landed a single clean hit on him, they would win. He removed his jacket, leaving only his vest, and told them to attack with everything they had. The boys rushed him. Nito tried a kick to the face, but Izuku dodged it, noting that Nito showed knowledge of martial arts. Testetisu covered his hand in metal and threw a punch that Izuku avoided. Izuku observed that they needed to be faster. Sen attempted a surprise kick from behind, which Izuku also evaded. Awase used his quirk to fire blasts at Izuku, who dodged them. Hiryu sent a powerful blast that Izuku blocked with his bare hands. Hiryu was stunned that Izuku could do that. Izuku then moved in and struck Hiryu, knocking him unconscious. Several boys ran toward Izuku at once with their quirks activated. Izuku grinned and met their assault, moving with fluid, exaggerated speed and taking them down in a fast, stylized series of maneuvers. He taunted them to show more. Testedisu followed with a punch that created a gust of wind pressure, prompting Izuku to smirk as he dodged a handstand kick from Sen and intercepted a metallic blow from Nito. Izuku countered with a coordinated strike that flattened 3 attackers at once and left them knocked out. After the fight, Izuku assessed them as at best A rank and decided to wait for the others to recover. While they were unconscious, he began physical exercises. About an hour later, the boys woke to find him balancing in a one-arm handstand without his vest. Nito guessed they had been beaten, and Izuku confirmed that they had. Izuku announced the training plan. They would start with strengthening their bodies and hand-to-hand combat, then work on quirk control. He called forth his shadows, Bellion and Bar Igris, and instructed them to help build the boys' bodies, teach hand-to-hand techniques, and assist with quirk control. Baru and Bellion agreed. Igris inquired about the blonde-haired boy, and Izuku said he would train that student personally. Izuku took Nito aside, explaining that Nito's quirk was not at full potential and required special focus. Nito eagerly accepted the challenge. Izuku trained him in martial arts, hand-to-hand combat, swordsmanship, and conditioning. He checked on the other boys periodically and helped where needed. The girls, under EI and Arlecchino, also improved, learning martial arts and sword techniques. Over time, Class 1B grew markedly stronger, reaching S-rank levels, and Nito became powerful enough to rival legends in their prime. The boys also became more muscular and disciplined through Izuku's regimen. On the last day of training, Izuku presented Nito with a gift. He opened a case and revealed 2 finely crafted swords. Nito was surprised and grateful, calling Izuku an affectionate nickname. Izuku smiled at Nito's gratitude and accepted the bond between them. The scene shifted to the Dragon Realm, where Antares sat on his throne worrying about the Shadow Monarch's growing strength. He feared that at his current power level he would lose in a confrontation. Maria entered the throne room and approached him tenderly. She asked if he was all right, comforted him, and kissed him lightly. Antares thanked her and asked her to call the other monarchs and arrange a meeting. Maria contacted the other monarchs and they gathered to hear Antares speak. Ciliad, Rakan, Quirk, Yogyamunt, Baron, and Tarnak took their seats. Antares pointed out that the Shadow Monarch had been growing stronger. Quirk and Yogyamunt confirmed the observation, noting the Shadow Monarch's overwhelming power during a recent clash. Baron recalled their narrow escape and complained that the Shadow Monarch had taken his weapons, forcing him to recreate them. Tarnak asked if Antares had a plan. Antares smirked and asked if they still had the mana cores of the rulers they had defeated. When the others confirmed they still possessed them, Antares began to explain his plan. The monarchs discussed strengthening their powers with a core. Rakan approved the plan. Ciliad called it a good idea. Baron agreed that, with their monarch powers and the ruler's abilities, the Shadow Monarch would stand no chance. Yogyamunt agreed but asked Antares about the traitor Ligia. Antares replied that he had plans for him. Tarnak warned about the dangers, and Antares revealed that he intended to use Ligia's army to strike Earth and cause chaos among humans, smiling at the thought. Rakan noted Antares' slyness, and Antares accepted the compliment with quiet amusement. Quirk asked whether Antares would absorb a ruler's core. Antares announced that he planned to absorb the Absolute Being's core instead, which shocked the assembled monarchs. Ciliad and Tarnak questioned his wisdom and reminded him of the Absolute Being core's immense power. Antares insisted that success would make him unstoppable and ordered everyone to prepare. They dispersed to carry out their orders. Antares turned to his queen and told her he would be gone for a while, and asked her to take care of herself. Maria promised to do so. Antares gave her a brief, tender farewell and departed. He then created his domain and prepared to take the Absolute Being's core, smirking as he began the process. Across the rest world, Izuku sat on his throne with Belian and Igris at his side. Belian asked if Izuku felt the disturbance. Izuku confirmed he did. Igris wondered whether the monarchs were planning something. Izuku was certain they were. Baru returned and bowed before Izuku, reporting that in the realm of light the rulers' bodies had been found and their mana cores were missing. Izuku realized the monarchs might be attempting to absorb those cores. The idea entertained him. He imagined the monarchs growing stronger and becoming more interesting to watch. He rose and, flanked by his strongest commanders, prepared to observe the coming days with a smile, anticipating what would unfold. Izuku rested on his bed with Ei and Arlecchino close by. He reflected on the monarch's cunning plan and told himself to sleep since the sports festival was approaching. As he closed his eyes, he found himself in a dark place. A soft light revealed figures seated on thrones before him. A familiar voice addressed him as Izuku Yagi. Izuku snapped back that this was not the name he used, and a chill of restrained anger moved through him. The figures, past users of One for All, asked him to accept their power. Izuku met them with cold suspicion and refused. When they questioned how he could decline, he explained that he had copied the quirk and enhanced it into a version he called Shadow Boost, making his One for All far stronger. He told them he did not need their power. Nana Shimura implored him to give them a chance, but Izuku, hardened by past hurts, told Nana that when her daughter had neglected and abused him, he had severed ties with that family and no longer considered them relatives. He refused to entertain the request, left the inner world, and Nana was left to quietly grieve. He woke and found his partners not beside him, so he rose and took a shower. When he emerged, I entered to check on him and told him she had made breakfast. Izuku thanked her and prepared himself. He admired his appearance briefly before joining everyone for breakfast. At the table, they praised Ei's cooking. Nito called Ei a big sister figure, and Kendo reacted with surprise. Nito explained that Ei felt like an older sister to him, smiling as the class around them grew a little flustered. Izuku noticed the attention and allowed himself a small, amused smirk, thinking that his friend might become very popular. He asked the class if they were ready for the sports festival, and the group answered confidently that they planned to win. Izuku excused himself to attend to a matter elsewhere. As he left, his phone rang. He answered and was surprised to hear Naruto's voice. Naruto checked in and mentioned that Kiyomi was with him and that they were arriving in Japan that day. He asked if Izuku could pick them up at the airport. Izuku agreed and hung up, pleased. He told Ei that Naruto and Kiyomi would be arriving, which made her happy at the prospect of reuniting with her friend. Later at the airport, Izuku scanned the crowd until he heard a familiar greeting. He turned and saw his old friend Naruto and Kiyomi approaching. They greeted each other warmly with a handshake and a hug, noting how long it had been since they last met. Izuku nodded and then looked at Kiyomi. He greeted her and said it was good to see her. Kiyomi hugged him and asked where her best friend Ei was. Izuku explained that Ei was at UA right now. Kiyomi expressed surprise that they had joined UA, and Izuku confirmed that they had and suggested they go there. They went to UA, and Izuku introduced Kiyomi to everyone. He informed Principal Nizu that they intended to join UA, and Nizu agreed. Nizu arranged a dorm for them on the same floor as Izuku. Later, Izuku and Naruto trained in the gym. Izuku asked Naruto how Korea had been. Naruto said it had been good, but his past still troubled him. Izuku admitted he felt the same and mentioned that people had even challenged him to a fight. Naruto laughed and asked if anyone actually believed they could win against Izuku. Izuku agreed and smiled, saying it was good to have Naruto back. Naruto said it was good to be back and then reminded Izuku that the rulers were dead. Izuku confirmed that the monarchs had been killed and their mana cores taken. Naruto guessed the mana cores had been absorbed to boost others' powers, and Izuku agreed, noting that they still posed no real challenge because he had not yet used even 10% of his power. Naruto smirked and proposed a spar, and Izuku accepted. Izuku told Principal Nizu that he and Naruto would have a sparring match in the fake city. Nizu called everyone to come and watch because he wanted to see how strong Naruto was. In the fake city, Naruto asked if Izuku was ready, using the nickname Zuku, and Izuku replied that he was born ready, using the nickname Ru. They exchanged smirks. Tai told everyone to get ready, and Kiyomi announced that they were about to see the battle of the strongest. Both of them declared that this would be a contest to remember. Naruto Uzumaki age, 4 quirkless. Likes. His family, ramen, the Uchiha family, his friends, heroes. Dislikes, villains, artists, bullies. Naruto Uchiha age, 20 titles, Demonic Emperor, King of Chaos, Abyss Walker, Lord Chaos, Dragon Slayer, God Slayer, the Lazy Prodigy. Likes. His wife, the Uchiha family, training, Izuku, Arlecchino, Class 1B, True Heroes, ramen. Dislikes, his past, Izuku's past, anyone who tries to hurt his wife, fake heroes, artists, villains. Looks, abilities and skills, not specified. Immeasurable strength. Immeasurable speed. Immeasurable durability. Chaos manipulation. Elemental manipulation. Matter manipulation. Weapon creation. Unlimited inventory. Curse manipulation. Emporize. The zone. Mana manipulation. Reality manipulation. Chaos control. Perfect hypnosis. Energy manipulation. Combat mastery. Time manipulation. Mana zone. Keto spells. Hado spells. Demonic arts. Light manipulation. Devour. Key manipulation. Chaos bloodless. Cleaver. Dismantle. Memory manipulation. Soul manipulation. Shadow manipulation. Naruto had mastered several sword techniques. Chaos Slicer, Abyssy Sword, Blades of Chaos, Spirit Sword, Soul Slicer. He could access a spirit form granted by the Spirit Sword and a Chaos God form. His hero suit and weapons were part of his arsenal. He was married to Kiyomi Uchiha, who was 20 and possessed both the Mangekyo Sharingan and the Rinnegan. His tastes and dislikes mirrored those of his friend Izuku. Backstory: Naruto had been born quirkless like Izuku and was neglected and abused by his family. At 10 he was disowned. He rose from that hardship to become known as the God of Chaos, much as Izuku had become the Shadow Monarch. They met when they were 15 and became close friends and rivals because of their similar pasts. At 17, Naruto met Kiyomi, they fell in love and married, and he took her family name to leave his old life behind. Narration shifted to the training ground where Izuku and Naruto faced each other. Naruto asked if Izuku was ready, and Izuku answered that he was born ready. Both fighters took their stances, their hands cloaked in shadow energy and chaos energy. They both launched simultaneously and struck with such speed that onlookers saw only shock waves from the clash. In the observation room, Nizu exclaimed that he could not believe their speed. Kiyomi noted that they looked like they were having fun. Ei smiled and agreed. Arlecchino admitted she could not keep up. Bakugo and Shoto seethed, angered that Izuku had grown stronger and that a new person had even greater power. Nizu asked Kiyomi if she could explain how Izuku and Naruto had become friends. Kiyomi declined, saying that was not for her to share and that he should ask them himself. Back on the field, Naruto and Izuku traded blows at incredible velocity. Izuku kicked Naruto, who slid back and smirked. Naruto acknowledged Izuku's improvement, and Izuku matched the smirk as they accelerated their pace. Izuku kicked Naruto into the air, teleported behind him, and attempted a punch, which Naruto dodged before slamming Izuku down and charging a downward attack he called Stardust Fall. Izuku countered by drawing a sword from his inventory and releasing an attack he called Getsuga Tensho. The two strikes collided in a massive, non-graphic explosion. The observers were stunned by the power displayed. Kendo could hardly believe it. Katsuki and Shoto were rendered speechless. Izumi wondered how her brother could be so strong, and All Might wondered how Izuku had achieved such power. When the smoke cleared, Izuku was standing in a large crater looking up at Naruto with a smirk. Izuku asked if Naruto's move had been new, and Naruto confirmed it. Izuku suggested raising the stakes, and Naruto agreed with a grin. Naruto rushed down again but Izuku dodged and countered with a kick to the gut. Naruto grabbed Izuku's leg and slammed him into the ground, then tried to punch but Izuku evaded and kicked him back to create distance. They exchanged words about improvement before summoning their swords. Izuku called forth Snowflower and Naruto summoned his Chaos Slicer. They clashed again. Naruto attempted a slash, but Izuku sidestepped. Naruto covered his blade in chaos energy and launched a chaos slash. Izuku blocked it with his hand and taunted him lightly. Naruto materialized behind Izuku and elbowed him. Izuku grabbed Naruto's hand and struck him, causing Naruto to stagger and cough, then the two traded blows and created space between them. Both fighters acknowledged the pain and the thrill and prepared to continue. They engaged in a hand-to-hand sequence. Naruto saw an opening and kicked Izuku, who slid and readied a sword technique called Judgment Cut. The slashes aimed at Naruto, but Izuku performed the near impossible and dodged the Judgment Cut. Naruto was momentarily taken aback by Izuku's skill. Izuku charged and struck Naruto, who grimaced and examined his torn clothing before removing his shirt. His wounds healed rapidly afterward. Naruto then activated an attack called Black Box Open, Fuga. The blast singed Izuku's clothing, but Izuku countered and the impact sent both fighters flying. Izuku rose as his wounds healed instantly and smiled at Naruto, declaring it round 2. Naruto matched him. Before they could clash again, Arlecchino, and Kiyomi intervened and told them to stop. Izuku protested that they had only just begun, and Naruto agreed, but the others pointed out the damage they were causing. Reluctantly they agreed to stop. Izuku put on a shirt from his inventory and Naruto did the same. They decided to get something to eat. As they passed a doorway, a group from Izuku's past stood pleading for a chance. Izuku's former acquaintances asked for mercy and to be given an opportunity. Naruto and Izuku tensed, and a fierce, intimidating aura washed over them. The older men and guards were overwhelmed and fell back, gasping for breath from the sudden intimidation. All Might attempted to interject but was cut off as Naruto and Izuku asserted control over the situation and warned them to remain down until they had left. Once the tension eased, they allowed breath to return and relax their auras. As they turned to leave, Izuku looked back at the assembled students and, with determined intensity, promised that at the sports festival the next day he would defeat them all. Naruto echoed the challenge. The day of the sports festival arrived and everyone was preparing. The story opened in the locker rooms where Izuku prepared for the festival. He thought today might be the day he would prove himself, but he had a nagging sense that something bad could happen. To be safe, he cast his shadow to encompass the stadium and finished getting ready. He took a last look at his outfit and felt confident. Naruto arrived in his own stylish clothes and asked if Izuku was ready. Izuku confirmed that he was, and they left together. Outside, their classmates waited. Yui expressed relief that they were finally there and asked what had taken so long. Izuku said they had just been getting ready. Yagi sighed at her partner and urged everyone to move along. The event announcer welcomed everyone to the sports festival of 2025 and announced that this year would be more interesting because of the strong students in attendance. He invited Aizawa to comment, and Aizawa dismissed the showmanship with impatience. The presenter then began calling the classes onto the field and saved a dramatic introduction for Class 1B. Class 1B marched out to an enthusiastic roar from the crowd. Izuku stood in front of his classmates with Naruto at his side. Many of the girls in the stands reacted loudly and emotionally at the sight of them, and a few shouted their admiration. Ei, Kiyomi, and Izuku gave the crowd a stern glare that quieted the more exuberant spectators. Midnight stepped onto the platform in a striking outfit, drawing appreciative reactions from some of the audience. She was about to explain the rules when a portal opened in the sky and a woman emerged. Izuku's eyes widened as he sensed a powerful energy. Multiple energy signatures flared around him, raising his alarm. Izuku urgently commanded that everyone be teleported away from the stadium. Naruto responded immediately and unleashed chaos magic to transport the crowd and participants to safety. With the stadium cleared, Izuku faced the newcomer with a serious expression and asked who she was. The woman identified herself as Sarah Bale, one of Lord Antares' commanders. Izuku inferred that she had been sent to sow chaos. Sarah confirmed her orders and intended to cause as much disruption as possible. Izuku challenged her attempt, confident he would not allow chaos while he was present. Sarah dismissed him as merely a weak human. Her words enraged Izuku, who bristled at being underestimated. Naruto instructed that the heroes be notified and tasked with securing the city. He teleported away to coordinate with them, appearing before several classmates and nearby heroes. He told Kiyomi and the others that he would explain later, but that they needed to help keep the city safe and stay away from the stadium for their own safety. Yagi asked for more information, but Naruto only insisted that they follow his directions for now. Bakugo demanded whether Naruto was implying they were weak. Naruto met him with a sudden intimidating intensity, telling him they could not handle what was coming if they rushed in. Katsuki felt a chill at Naruto's tone. Naruto then asked Principal Nizu to cooperate and left to return to Izuku. Back at the stadium, Sarah declared that the fun was about to begin. Portals opened and otherworldly beings began to emerge, filling the sky with an advancing force. Izuku looked up at the army arrayed before him. Naruto returned and commented on the sheer size of the enemy force. Izuku confirmed that Naruto had arranged evacuation and security, and Sarah smirked, taunting them about their next move. As another energy signature flared, Naruto understood and signaled to Izuku. Naruto teleported toward that new threat. Izuku focused and released his aura. The pressure of his presence made Sarah visibly recoil in fear. The scene ended on the tense build of power and the looming clash between Izuku and the invaders. Sarah watched the darkness swell around Izuku and felt a cold dread she had never known before. The air shifted and the sky dimmed as an overwhelming aura spread from him, the aura of the Monarch of Shadows. Izuku ordered his forces to arise, and a black domain expanded to cover the assembly. The soldiers looked around in fear as shadowy tendrils emerged from the domain and swept across them, overwhelming them and transforming them into shadow copies aligned with Izuku. Sarah stood speechless, terrified beyond belief. She had never seen such power. She recognized that this was more than mere darkness. It felt like death itself. Izuku gathered his new soldiers and reminded everyone never to underestimate death. 2 years had passed since the events at the sports festival. In that time, gates had begun opening around the world. Since most quirks could not deal with the monsters coming through, Izuku had been clearing gates himself alongside Naruto and his team. He had also founded a hero agency called the Ajin Guild, which rose to become the top agency in Korea. Izuku became Korea's #1 hero and, together with EI and Arlecchino, moved back to Korea. In his office one morning, Izuku reflected that Antares had been silent since their last encounter, and that Antares had been opening gates around the world. He had even tried searching for Antares in the realm of the monarchs, but Antares had not been there. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Nito, the younger brother figure, entered and told Izuku that Japan had reported a massive gate in Tokyo. Izuku looked at the tablet Nito handed him and saw the news of the gate. Naruto could not clear it because he had gone with Kiyomi, EI, and Arlecchino to a gate in China. Izuku decided he would go to Tokyo himself and instructed Nito to prepare for departure the next day. Across the void, Antares sat upon a throne, changed from an old man into a more formidable figure after absorbing the core of the absolute being. He taunted the Monarch of Shadows and welcomed the new recruits Maria had brought into their ranks. When Maria confirmed their strength, Antares smiled and spoke of an impending attack on Earth and a final battle with the Shadow Monarch, promising that they would see who would bring true destruction. Izuku woke refreshed and went downstairs to find breakfast ready. Dai and Arlecchino greeted him warmly. He returned their affection in a tender, familial way, sharing a calm, loving moment with them. They discussed the gate raid from the previous day. The monsters had been weak, and EI had wanted more of a challenge. Izuku laughed and suggested the next gate might be more exciting. When Arlecchino mentioned the Tokyo gate, Izuku explained that he would handle it himself because Naruto and the others were occupied. He promised to be careful, and after a brief, affectionate farewell he showered, dressed, and prepared to leave. In the garage, Izuku took a new car to the airport and, upon arrival, teleported it back to the garage. Nito waited for him outside. Reporters swarmed as they approached, and they boarded Izuku's private jet. Izuku checked his phone and saw news of his trip to Japan and the way fans had reacted. He activated his AI assistant Jarvis, who informed him they would arrive in 1 hour. Izuku and Nito passed the time playing a casual game of Uno as the flight continued. In Japan, students at UA buzzed with excitement. Izumi told her classmates that she had heard Izuku, their beloved big brother figure, was coming back. The girls reacted with admiration when they saw a picture of him in black, commenting on how mature he appeared and teasing that they would convince him to marry them. The teachers observed the students' enthusiasm with a mix of resignation and amusement. Nizu, watching the cameras, sighed at the students' antics. All Might burst into his office, eager to know if his son was coming to Japan. Nizu confirmed that Izuku would only be coming to clear the gate in Tokyo and that visitors would not be permitted to see him. Inko pleaded to see her child and asked for forgiveness for past mistakes. Nizu told Inko that, given everything that had happened, earning forgiveness would be difficult. Inko broke down, distraught. All Might comforted her as they left the office. Shortly after, Nizu received a call from the Hero Commission instructing him to send heroes to escort Izuku to UA, and he arranged for them to do so. Back in Class 1B, the students talked about Izuku and Nito. Yui told the others that Izuku and Nito were returning, and the class reacted with a mixture of excitement and admiration. The girls blushed and whispered about how Nito had grown more mature, while the boys expressed their eagerness to see how much they had both improved. The private jet touched down and Izuku and Nito stepped onto the tarmac. Izuku walked through the airport carrying a bag, Nito at his side. Reporters and cameras swarmed to capture images of him. The heroes sent to pick him up arrived and sensed a powerful aura radiating from Izuku. Aizawa noted that he had seen many heroes in his life, but Izuku was different. He seemed to embody power itself. They escorted Izuku to UA, where the president of the Hero Commission received him. The president greeted Izuku and confirmed that he had come in response to the gate that had opened in Tokyo. Izuku confirmed that he had been informed by the prime minister and stated that he would clear the gate himself, requesting that no civilians be present. The president acknowledged his request. The scene shifted to a shattered platform where Izuku stood. He ordered his soldiers to prepare, and the Shadow Army answered their king. The gate cracked and massive giants began to emerge. Izuku smiled, commanded the army forward, and raised his hand to give the signal. The shadows surged like a living tide and charged the giants in perfect unison, their roar carrying across the battlefield. Builled led the forward assault. When Izuku held back Baru and Igris for a moment, it was only to time the decisive blow. The Shadow Army overwhelmed the giants with coordinated strikes, and the battle was broadcast worldwide. Spectators were stunned by Izuku's control over his forces. A new, larger giant began to push through the gate, and Izuku warned his lieutenants to await his signal. Then, with astounding speed, he closed the distance. Builled was ordered to cut the giant's legs, and he delivered a precise strike that toppled the creature and left it off balance. Igris followed, landing a heavy blow that stunned the giant. Izuku drew his Demon King daggers and struck the giant, leaving it reeling. Baru finished the fight with a decisive strike that felled the creature. The engagement was fierce but presented in sudden, choreographed motions rather than gory detail. When the gate failed to close, Izuku realized the giant was not the boss. The portal began to pull the fallen creature inward, and Izuku claimed its energy for himself, using his Devour ability to absorb its essence and gain a significant power boost. He instructed his soldiers to hold position and told Baru that he would enter the portal to confront the ruler inside. The shadows acknowledged him, and Izuku leaped into the swirling gateway. He emerged into a vast hall. Izuku took a breath and wondered aloud where they had landed. Baru observed that it appeared to be a long corridor. Laughter echoed down the passage, drawing them toward its source. They came upon a chained figure. Izuku recognized him as Ligia, the Monarch of Beginnings, and sighed at the sight. Ligia confirmed his identity and explained that he had been imprisoned by Antares and the other monarchs after failing to obtain a ruler's mana core. He had been betrayed and locked away when he attempted to plot against Antares. Izuku pressed Ligia for answers about Antares' plans and why gates were opening around the world. Ligia revealed that Antares intended to let mana leak into their world to create widespread conflict, setting the stage for a rematch between the Shadow Monarch and the other monarchs. Antares also sought to eliminate Izuku, destroy humanity, and remake the world according to his own design. Ligia offered to help Izuku take down the other monarchs if he were freed. To prove his sincerity, Ligia activated a binding skill called Oath of Faith, which the system confirmed would prevent either party from lying to the other. Izuku agreed to the bond and questioned whether Ligia could be made into one of his shadows. Ligia reacted with shock when he saw an image of Ashbourne reflected in Izuku, then explained that monarchs could not be manifested as shadows in the usual way. Izuku countered that he possessed a unique ability to bind even high beings to his shadows, a claim that startled Ligia. Since their goals aligned for the moment, Izuku moved to free him. He struck one of the chains, bending the restraint and loosening the bond binding Ligia. Before cutting the final link, Izuku asked whether Ligia truly stood with humanity. Ligia remained silent, and Izuku realized that Ligia's loyalties were not to people but to his own ends. Izuku declared the deal off. When Ligia reacted violently, attempting a savage counterattack, Izuku evaded and delivered a swift, decisive strike that incapacitated him. Ligia tried one last desperate move but was stopped by another precise blow from Izuku that ended the threat. Izuku dismissed Ligia as unworthy of becoming one of his shadows and walked away, leaving the broken chains behind. Baru disappeared into nothingness and reappeared at Izuku's call. Baru asked if everything was finished. Izuku told Baru to return, then stepped out of the portal to find his army kneeling in wait. He ordered his shadows to return, and the soldiers merged back into the darkness from which they had come. Nito ran toward Izuku, relieved and excited that the gate had been cleared. Izuku confirmed that he had done it and said they would stay a few days before going home. Nito accepted that and relaxed. Izuku then noticed figures from his past approaching. He sighed heavily and asked what they wanted. Inko rushed forward, tearful and relieved that her son had come back. Izuku snapped at her, furious at being called that and demanding she stop. Katsumi, hopeful and bright-eyed, asked if Izuku had returned so they could marry. Izuku recoiled and said he had no intention of marrying her. Katsumi burst into tears. Katsuki lunged with an explosive punch, but Nito intervened, blocking the attack with a cold, glowing stare and warned him to never try that again. Nito struck Katsuki and an image of Izuku materialized behind them. Izuku warned his past selves that approaching him again would not end well and handed them a final warning. Nito's mother called in a panic to say Nito's father had entered a coma and was in critical condition. Nito rushed to the hospital. Izuku, having overheard the call, decided to go as well. He summoned Kamish, his dragon, and was preparing to mount when Inko grabbed his hand, begging him to come back and try to be a family again. Izuku pushed away and refused. He mounted Kamish and flew to the hospital. At the hospital, Nito sat by his father's bedside, clutching his hand and quietly hoping his father would wake. Izuku appeared in the room almost silently and smiled, teasing Nito that he did not need to cry. He produced the holy water of life, applied it, and left a short note on the table explaining that he had healed their father and that it was a birthday gift from his older brother. A passing doctor discovered the father awake and summoned Nito and his mother in a rush. Nito embraced his father, crying with relief, and read the note aloud to everyone. Nito thanked his older brother. Outside the hospital, Izuku looked up at the window of the recovery room, smiled, and walked away, whispering a happy birthday to his little brother. Izuku walked through the streets, unnoticed by some and stared at by others taking pictures. Two little girls accidentally bumped into his leg and trembled in fear. Izuku knelt, put them at ease, and hugged them gently, promising to protect them and asking what was wrong. A man stepped out from an alley. The girls froze at the sight of him. Overhaul introduced himself to the children, pretending to be their father and claiming he had been looking for them. Izuku questioned whether they were truly his daughters. Overhaul lied and tried to play it off, but Izuku's presence radiated an authority that made him nervous. Overhaul decided to flee and attack rather than be captured. Baru appeared at Izuku's command and struck Overhaul with a decisive blow that sent him down, dazed and defeated but without graphic injury. Izuku briefly probed the girls' memories and saw glimpses of experiments and abuse they had endured. He ordered Baru to take Overhaul to a place where he could no longer harm anyone and to ensure he would face justice. Baru obeyed. Izuku told the girls that the bad man was gone. One girl introduced herself as Eri and the other as Anya. When Izuku asked about their parents, they looked down and said their parents had been killed by Overhaul. Izuku, softening, offered to become their guardian. Anya brightened at the idea. Eri looked uncertain but hopeful. A short, quiet moment bridged the uncertainty as they moved away from the alley and toward a safer place. The two little girls told Izuku that someone had called them cursed. He asked Eri why she had said that, and they explained their quirks and how Overhaul had labeled them cursed children. Izuku, inwardly furious, instructed Baru to make sure the man would answer for it, and Baru acknowledged him as his leader. Izuku then reassured the girls that they were not cursed and that their quirks could help and save many lives. His warm smile brought tears to the girls' eyes, and he hugged them gently until they stopped crying. He asked if they wanted to go see their mothers, and when they excitedly said yes, he told them there were two. The girls smiled for the first time and began jumping with excitement. Izuku promised them that he would do everything to keep them safe and always make them smile. 2 weeks later, after training, Izuku sat catching his breath and thought about the new combinations of skills he had developed. Yagi called from the other room that breakfast was ready. He went to get changed and joined the others at the table, where Naruto, Kiyomi, Ei, Arlecchino and the two girls were already eating. They greeted him cheerfully. When Anya asked if he would drop them at school that morning, Izuku agreed and told them to get ready. Arlecchino gave him a quick affectionate kiss before going upstairs to prepare the children. Izuku smiled, finished breakfast, and drove Anya and Eri to school. Izuku returned to his agency and found Naruto in the conference room. Naruto informed him that world leaders and pro-heroes wanted to meet because gates had started appearing and monsters emerging from them kept repeating a single command. They demanded the destruction of the Shadow Monarch, Ashborn. Izuku realized this could mean the monarchs would attack soon. He explained to Naruto what Legia had told him about the situation. Naruto admitted the news was bad and suggested informing the world about the incoming threat. Izuku agreed that the world needed to be warned. The meeting was scheduled in 2 days in America, and they prepared to leave. At the airport, Izuku reassured his daughters that he had to go but promised a family day when he returned. He asked Eri to take care of her sister, patted their heads, and hugged them before departing. Naruto and Kiyomi exchanged a brief, affectionate goodbye, and Izuku and Naruto boarded their private jet. They arrived, booked a hotel, and prepared for the conference the next day. At the hero gathering, Izuku and Naruto entered and immediately drew attention. Inko saw her son and moved to speak with him, but Izuku walked past. Norman, the top hero from Germany, told his assistant they intended to win over Mr. Kagenu. As Norman approached, he felt a dark, unsettling aura emanating from Izuku. He realized that Izuku carried his shadows with him and became nervous. Izuku noticed Norman sensing his presence and acknowledged it silently. Naruto reminded Izuku that the heroes' meeting was about to begin. Izuku said he would join him there. All Might and Inko approached Izuku while he stood alone. All Might asked to talk with him, and Inko tried to speak, but Izuku's aura flared and he cut them off sharply, insisting there was nothing to discuss. He walked away, leaving Inko in tears. In the meeting hall, the hero president opened the session to brief the assembled heroes about the gates appearing around the world. Before he could finish, Izuku pushed through the doors, and all heads turned as he descended the stairs and took a seat. The president continued the briefing, explaining that the monsters emerging from the gates repeatedly demanded the death of the Shadow Monarch Ashborn. The room absorbed the gravity of that message as the pro-heroes exchanged uneasy looks. Izuku stood serious as the panel called for Hero Ashborn to explain his connection to the mysterious gates that had been appearing around the world. A ripple of unease passed through the audience when Izuku released a sliver of his aura. Everyone turned toward him, unsettled. Greed, a smaller manifestation of Izuku's shadow, asked whether the liege would explain to them. Izuku answered that he would, and that if they refused to listen it would be their problem. He then rose and walked to the platform to address the pro-heroes. Izuku explained that the gates were portals to different worlds, bringing dangerous creatures through, and that they had been created by the monarchs to sow chaos and destruction. The pro-heroes reacted with shock and disbelief. One of the pro-heroes demanded whether the monarchs were people like Izuku and asked him to explain what the monarchs were and what they intended. Izuku told them plainly that the heroes were too weak to stop the monarchs. The pro-heroes erupted in anger at being called weak. Naruto stood and agreed with Izuku that they were not strong enough to confront the monarchs. Naruto then claimed, with a smirk and the rivalry that defined him, that he could kill a monarch. The panel challenged him to prove it. Izuku sighed and decided to demonstrate the difference in power. He raised his hand and opened multiple portals, releasing dark energies that washed over the hall. The heroes felt the presence of something ominous, as if death were looming, and fear spread among them. Later, outside the building, Naruto praised Izuku for showing the others who held the advantage. Izuku agreed and said the heroes needed to understand their limits. Naruto said he had something to take care of and would see Izuku at the hotel. They exchanged a brief handshake, and Naruto teleported away. Alone, Izuku sensed trouble and prepared. He instructed his three strongest shadows Igris, Baru, and Bellion to return to Korea and protect their queens, his Little Bean and Peanut, and Kiyomi. The three shadows manifested and pledged their loyalty. Izuku dismissed them, and they vanished, traveling to Korea. A council of monarchs assembled. Antares confirmed that the attack was ready and ordered that Izuku's family be killed to break him. Ciliad asked about his friend's fate. Antares appointed Baron and Tarnak to handle that while Rakan and Koratio would strike the Shadow Monarch's family. Antares revealed his plan to open a massive gate over Japan to bring his army through. His wife Maria would be at his side. The monarchs smirked with grim satisfaction, declaring that today they would attempt to eliminate the Shadow Monarch. Back in Izuku's quarters, Izuku checked in with Baru, who reported nothing unusual so far. Izuku worried that something big was about to happen. He switched on the news and watched live footage reporting that the largest gate had opened over Japan and Korea. The announcement sent a sharp curse from Izuku. He donned his gray coat, jumped through a window, and summoned his Mount Kaisel, commanding it to fly to Japan at breakneck speed. In Korea, Izuku's family watched the news with mounting alarm. Kiyomi noted that the gate was releasing a dangerous aura. Suddenly, a black domain spread across the country. The family sensed an incoming attack and EI gathered Eri and Anya to dodge. I checked on the girls, ensuring they were all right. 3 figures appeared, Ciliad, Rakan, and Quirk, who announced themselves as monarchs come to kill. Arlecchino challenged them, asking what made them think they could succeed where others had failed. The monarchs declared their superiority and launched the assault. Ciliad unleashed an icy attack that Arlecchino deflected with a summoned weapon. Kiyomi intervened, ready to fight. As the clash escalated, Kai's shadow extended and manifested Baru, Belian, and the others. Baru called the attackers bold, and Belian warned that they would pay for attacking the liege family. The monarchs taunted that a barrier over Korea prevented contracts with shadow monarchs, but Igris revealed that their liege's sight allowed them to perceive what their liege perceived. This unexpected revelation made the monarchs pause. News of the gate reached Naruto, who sensed Kiyomi in danger and rushed toward Korea with lightning speed movement. He intercepted a mana blast mid-flight, summoned his new sword Chaos Destroyer, and unleashed a slash of chaotic energy that neutralized the incoming attack. Naruto confronted the attackers, who identified themselves as Baron, the monarch of White Flames, and Tarnak, the monarch of Iron Body. They declared their intent to kill the friend of the Shadow Monarch. Naruto's fighting aura flared fiercely, intimidating the monarchs, and he prepared to end the confrontation quickly. In Japan, Izuku spoke with Nizu about preparations when he suddenly sensed his shadow in combat. Using shared vision, he observed EI protecting Eri and Anya while Kiyomi and Arlecchino were. Izuku felt a surge of fierce energy build within him, a controlled fury that shook the world and terrified everyone who saw it. He glared at the monarchs and made it clear that he would not allow them to harm his family. He admitted that he had ignored them for too long and that he intended to end their threat. Without hesitation, he sprinted at impossible speed, summoned his Mount Kaisel, and mounted him, urging Kaisel to fly toward Korea at full speed. He roared and they shot into the sky. The scene shifted to Korea, where Arlecchino and Igris clashed with the Frost Monarch. Arlecchino noted how strong their opponent was, and Cilia taunted them, trying to goad them into a mistake. The Frost Monarch struck, sending Arlecchino reeling and kicking Igris aside. Arlecchino acknowledged the monarch's strength, and Kiyomi arrived to hover beside her. EI appeared as well, bruised but standing. Arlecchino, Kiyomi, and EI took a moment to account for their missing comrades, and EI explained that Anya and Eri were with Burr. Rakan tried to provoke them, and Quirk suggested they should simply overwhelm their foes, speaking in a hungry, eager tone. As they prepared to press the attack, a sudden tide of fierce energy washed over them. All of them dropped to their knees, breathing hard as the intensity hit their bones. Izuku's shadows sensed it and recognized that the liege was enraged. Outside the domain, Izuku leapt from Kaisel, summoned Snowflower, and poured shadow energy into the blade with a technique he called Shadow Arts, Shadow Drive. He struck the barrier, shattering it and landing with enough force to create a vast crater. Smoke and dust rose until the air cleared, revealing Izuku standing, gripping Snowflower, his aura radiating a terrifying strength that made the monarchs flinch. Seeing the injuries on his allies made him even angrier. He fixed his gaze on the monarchs and made it clear that this day would mark their end. Izuku ordered his shadows to evacuate every citizen from the city and to escort his family to safety. After the evacuation was underway, he returned his focus to the monarchs, his expression hard and unyielding. He told them that they had the audacity to attack what belonged to him, and that he had tolerated them long enough. He declared his intention to earn the title of Monarch Killer. He produced one of his daggers and pointed it at them. The monarchs bristled, and suggested the fight would not be easy. Izuku sneered at the notion that they were equals, insisting that sharing the title of monarch did not put them on his level. Ciliad protested loudly, but Izuku cut him off and warned the Frost Monarch that if he disagreed, he should do something about it. Rakan charged in, furious. Izuku drew his sword and met him. Their clash was fast and furious, a flurry of blows exchanged at blistering speed. Izuku taunted Rakan for being slow, then avoided a clawed strike and drove a solid blow that sent Rakan tumbling. Iliad swooped down from above with a weapon, but Izuku dodged and answered with a strike that knocked the wind from him and left him shaken. Igris compared Izuku's strength to legendary fighters and found it formidable. Quirk tried to strike from behind, but Izuku anticipated the move, countered, and sent her stumbling. Izuku challenged Rakan for something more, urging him to show him what he had. The battle continued, intense and stylized, an exchange of rapid movements, sparks, and energy that crackled like thunder. Injuries were apparent, but nothing graphic. Bruises and fatigue showed on the combatants as the fight pushed them to their limits. The confrontation escalated as each side tested the other's boundaries in a fierce, anime-style showdown. A tense warning escaped someone as the combatants closed in. Rushing forward, they began to clash. Izuku taunted them, urging them to go faster. Iliad launched a blade strike, which Izuku allowed to pass as a feint. Izuku then kicked Rakan away and flowed into a rapid combo against Iliad. He mocked them, confident and challenging. Quirk snarled and warned Izuku not to get cocky. All three monarchs then summoned their armies, and Izuku only smirked. He increased his own forces as well, his shadow extending and manifesting countless soldiers. The monarchs noticed Kamish and froze, shocked by what they saw. Iliad demanded to know how this was possible and accused Kamish of betrayal. Quirk shouted his name. Kamish retorted that the others had always been arrogant, that they had attacked a monarch stronger than them. Rakan erupted in fury at being called weaker. Bru and Bellion demanded those words be taken back. Rakan refused. Before they could charge, Izuku ordered Bellion to stand down and promised to handle the matter himself. Bellion obeyed. Izuku instructed his forces to wipe out the enemy soldiers, then unleashed his shadows, which roared and surged into the opposing ranks. The battlefield erupted as shadow soldiers clashed with monarch troops. Quirk and Iliad coordinated their attack. Rakan and Iliad pursued Izuku, but he countered everything. Izuku taunted them for being predictable. Quirk formed a poisonous appendage with her telekinesis and sent it toward Izuku, but he dodged and kicked Rakan. When Iliad slashed, Izuku evaded and struck him, sending him soaring. He teleported behind Quirk and knocked her back as well. Rising into the air, Izuku charged mana into his hand and seized Iliad by the face, attempting to freeze him. The attempt failed against Izuku's defense. He shouted for his shadows to press down and then hurled Iliad into the ground with full force, creating a massive impact crater. Rakan teleported in to strike, but Izuku dodged, summoned daggers, and forced Rakan to stagger and cough as he landed hard. Izuku used a technique called Gestgua Tensho, striking with a focused barrage that hit Iliad hard. He taunted the monarchs for remaining weak despite their assimilated power cores. Deciding it was time to end the fight, he rushed Quirk at incredible speed, coating his daggers in shadow energy and unleashing shadow arts. Abyssal Strike. He struck with blinding speed. Iliad cried out for Quirk. Rakan tried to take advantage of Izuku's distraction, but Izuku evaded and countered, slashing Rakan and kicking him away. Iliad rushed back in, clashing again with Izuku, but Izuku punched him aside and watched Rakan attempt to flee through a portal. As Rakan tried to leave the planet, Izuku created a domain that covered the area and stopped him. Rakan hid his presence, suddenly chilled with true fear for the first time in his life. He bowed and begged for mercy, addressing Izuku as the Shadow Monarch. Izuku asked why he should be spared after attacking his family, and his glare frightened Rakan. Izuku declared that anyone who attacked his family did not deserve to live and ended the threat, the monarch collapsing as defeated. Iliad tried to run, but Igris moved to intercept. Iliad evaded Igris briefly, then Igris opened his cape and Izuku emerged dramatically. Izuku slammed the beast monarch down and subdued him. He then turned his attention to the frost monarch, signaling that the beast monarch had been defeated and that the frost monarch was next. Izuku unleashed a dark, dragon-shaped rush with his sword. The attack struck Iliad and his form dissipated into particles of light, leaving no graphic trace. Izuku looked to the sky, resolute, and declared that Antares would be next. After the battle, Izuku surveyed the battlefield. He observed the fallen and then commanded his shadows to rise. They awoke and bowed to him, swelling his army even further. From a distance he noticed that Ru still fought Baron and Tarnak. He ordered his shadows to expect Cassiel and return to his side. His family ran toward him with worry and relief. Yagi and Arlecchino called his name and jumped into his arms. They asked if he was all right and whether he was hurt. Eri and Anya joined them, tears in their eyes, and Izuku hugged them tightly. He assured them that he was fine and then checked on Kiyomi, who confirmed she was okay. Izuku explained that Naruto was still fighting the monarchs and that he would go check on him. Mounting Cassiel, Izuku flew toward Naruto's location. Naruto was facing two injured monarchs and reflected that they had been strong opponents, but he was confident. Baron and Tarnak struggled to understand how a human could be so powerful. Naruto observed that their other allies were likely already dealt with by Izuku and prepared to end the battle. A dark aura fell over the battlefield as Izuku descended above them on Cassiel, watching. He urged Ru to finish quickly because the family was worried. Naruto agreed and summoned his chaos daggers, channeling mana into them. He apologized to his foes in a solemn way and unleashed a chaos technique, dragon destruction, forming a massive dragon of pure chaos energy from his daggers. The overwhelming force struck the monarchs and detonated in a brilliant, anime-style explosion of energy. The scene closed with the shockwave sweeping across the battlefield as the clash reached its peak. Narrator POV. Izuku sat on his throne in the world of rest. Bellion stood at his right side and reported that the heroes had heard Izuku's warning but had decided to remain at the gate to fight. Izuku sighed and told Bellion that Antares would kill them when he emerged. Igris reported that 2 gates had opened, in Korea and Japan, and Baru warned that a great deal of mana was pouring from the Korean gate. Izuku decided they should go to the Korean gate, certain Antares would appear there. He instructed that some shadows remain in Japan with Naruto in case the enemy emerged there. He called Blaze and ordered Blaze and some shadows to go to Japan with Naruto and explain the plan. Blaze bowed and sent the shadows to Naruto. Izuku then summoned Rex and Regis from his shadow and ordered them to bring his family to the world of rest. Regis complied, brought Izuku's family to the world of rest, and explained the situation before instructing them to remain there. Outside the Korean gate, Izuku waited, impatient and tense. He muttered under his breath as he watched for Antares. In Japan, Naruto and the heroes stood outside the gate after evacuating the city. Naruto asked Aizawa if everyone had been moved out, and Aizawa confirmed the evacuation was complete. Naruto rebuked the assembled heroes for standing there when the threats beyond the gate were far above their level. He released a controlled portion of his bloodlust to test their resolve, and the heroes were quickly brought to their knees. Naruto telepathically contacted Izuku to report the situation. Izuku replied that he had already warned them and had given them freedom to act. He asked if the gate had opened. Naruto answered that it had not yet, and Izuku asked to be kept updated. Naruto agreed but insisted the heroes should be removed from the battlefield. Izuku sighed and then teleported everyone to the world of rest. Izuku's family then explained the situation to the evacuees. Back at the Korean gate, Izuku noticed the gate opening and called out that the enemy had arrived. Naruto confirmed telepathically that the gate on his side had opened as well, and he reported seeing an army led by a woman with an angelic presence. Izuku asked for clarification, and Naruto answered that it appeared to be an angelic army. Izuku asked if Naruto could handle them. Naruto smirked confidently and assured him that he could. Naruto confronted the approaching force and addressed the woman leading them. The woman introduced herself as Maria, wife of Antares. Naruto taunted that she had been sent to die, and Maria challenged him, asking what made him think he could defeat her. Portals opened and strange forms appeared. Naruto readied himself, called the shadows Izuku had left with him, and prepared for battle, amused by the prospect. Izuku faced Antares as the 2 auras clashed across the battlefield. Antares greeted him with a smirk and called him the Shadow Monarch. Izuku announced that today would be Antares' last day. He summoned his Kamish daggers and pointed them at Antares while Antares summoned his own sword and an army of destruction. The The system announced that the skill Dragon Fear had been activated. Izuku unleashed a terrible roar infused with shadow and dragon energy that spread fear and despair through the ranks, and then he declared the battle of the two monarchs begun. Antares responded with equal malice, calling for destruction in return. Their duel broke into a frenzy of blades and speed. Each clash created shockwaves that tore at the battlefield. Izuku and Antares matched each other strike for strike, trading rapid, powerful blows. Antares coated his sword in flames and slashed. Izuku blocked and maneuvered, both fighters pushing harder and faster than before. They both grinned, reveling in the intensity of the fight. Izuku found an opening, disarmed Antares, and desummoned his daggers to coat his hands in shadow energy. He struck with a black flash that sent Antares crashing into a distant mountain. Izuku pursued and leaped, releasing a powerful slash that cleaved through rock behind Antares. Antares retaliated immediately, rushing him and landing a heavy blow that left Izuku staggered and gasping for breath. Izuku grabbed Antares' hand and struck him with a knee that left Antares winded as well. The exchange left both monarchs pushed to their limits, the battlefield torn by their power. To be continued. Antares smirked and noted that it had been a while since he had seen his own blood. His nails lengthened and flared with flame as he called forth a dragon claw attack. He slashed toward Izuku, but Izuku dodged and jumped back. Before Izuku could fully recover, Antares unleashed a destructive breath of magic. The blast struck Izuku, who staggered, but he emerged from the flames with only a few bruises. Antares reacted in disbelief, but Izuku only claimed that nothing was impossible for him. Izuku summoned his daggers and rushed Antares. Antares scoffed that a weapon made from a dragon tooth could not harm the Dragon King. The system then activated the skills Mana Manipulation and Ruler's Authority for Izuku. With those powers, Izuku executed an abyss slash that struck Antares across the chest and left him severely wounded. Antares kicked Izuku, sending him sliding back. Izuku taunted Antares to show his strength. Antares transformed into his Dragon King form, and Izuku shifted into his third Shadow Monarch form, a display of mana that even surprised Antares. They closed the distance and clashed. Izuku declared himself the Grim Reaper to those who looked upon him, including Antares, and formed a dark scythe to reap at his foe. The attack missed Antares but cut through everything behind him. Antares launched a volley of destruction from above, conjuring a rain of destructive magic. Izuku countered with dark hell spears born of shadow. The two forces met, clashing in midair. One spear struck Antares' wing, forcing him down. Izuku followed up with a punch, and Antares caught Izuku in his jaws and hurled him into the sky. As Izuku ascended, his avatar shifted, his darkness armor appearing his first Shadow Monarch form. His eyes changed and he entered a heightened perception. Antares charged an ultimate attack, pouring together light magic, destruction magic, and the absolute being's mana into a colossal dragon breath. Its energy tinged with a bright yellow aura. Izuku realized the moment was do or die. He summoned from his inventory a legendary blade, cloaked it in shadow and destruction energy, and dove through the oncoming attack with a devastating move called Shadow Destruction Drive. His strike pierced the assault and struck Antares, staggering and blinding him. Antares recoiled, desummoned his own sword, and channeled shadow energy into his hand, but Izuku followed with a concentrated shadow punch that sent Antares crashing to the ground. Antares rose into his Dragon King form and summoned a sword while bellowing for Izuku's death. Izuku produced Kamish daggers and poured shadow energy into them. In their clash, Antares attempted to stab Izuku, but Izuku caught the blade bare-handed and snapped it, surprising Antares. Izuku kicked Antares back and attempted to summon an army, but there was no response. Izuku explained that his ally Naruto and his shadow forces had eliminated Antares' troops, so no army answered. Antares realized in horror that his wife Maria was dead, and his fury flared like a golden aura. He swore vengeance. Antares struck wildly. Izuku blocked with his daggers, then the sword broke and the daggers flew. Seizing the opening, Izuku punched Antares and prepared a final assault. Izuku drew his strongest dagger and channeled the highest concentration of shadow energy, manifesting the shadow art's final form, Slash of Darkness. Dark silhouettes rose and bound Antares so he could not move. Izuku drove his strike down. The overwhelming blow shattered Antares' defenses and left him broken and collapsed. Izuku slumped down, breathing heavily, and felt relief that it was finally over. Time passed and Izuku sat on the ground with his dagger at his side, watching Antares. Antares' eyes glowed a troubled purple as he struggled to comprehend his defeat and said that he could not believe he had lost to a human. Izuku replied that he was not ordinary but the second Shadow Monarch. Antares insisted that even after absorbing the core of the absolute being he still should not have been bested. Izuku suggested that Antares had not yet understood that as light grows brighter, shadows grow darker and stronger. Izuku then accused Antares of having sent Rakan and Baron to attack Ashbourne during the War of Monarchs and Rulers. Antares asked whether Baron had revealed that. Izuku answered that it had been Ashbourne and that he had seen it in Ashbourne's memories. Izuku made a rude gesture of contempt toward Antares. Antares, exhausted and enraged, summoned his sword once more to strike, but dark hell spears erupted and impaled him. Izuku commanded Antares to aid his growth, and as he spoke a shadow hound with yellow eyes emerged. The creature swallowed Antares whole, absorbing him into shadow. Izuku felt his power surge and exhaled cold air, sensing himself stronger than ever. He sifted through Antares' memories and glimpsed beings more powerful than even the absolute being, and he smiled at the new knowledge. Izuku challenged them, insisting nothing would change and daring them to come, warning that they would fall by his hand. He then noticed a portal opening and saw Naruto emerge from it. Naruto observed that Izuku appeared finished. Izuku acknowledged this and reached a hand into the portal. He commanded the fallen creatures to arise, transforming them into shadowy forms and calling them back into his own shadow. Naruto asked what would happen next. Izuku replied that he intended to close all the gates and bring peace to the world. Naruto questioned how he planned to accomplish that. Izuku explained that he would go back in time to stop the monarchs from ever arriving on Earth and prevent quirks from appearing. Naruto reacted with shock and pleaded that Izuku could not be serious. Izuku confirmed his resolve. Naruto reminded him that if he carried out this plan, everyone would forget him and his sacrifice. He would be an unknown savior. Naruto asked if he was sure he wanted that. Izuku said he was certain. Naruto asked about Eri and Arlecchino, expressing concern that they would not remember him either. Izuku fell silent for a moment, then insisted he would find a way to be remembered and that their bond would endure. He believed their connection was strong and the world still needed protecting. Naruto asked what Izuku meant. Izuku explained that the outer gods, known as the Lterim, would attack soon and try to take over their world. He told Naruto about the Lterim's purpose and why they were coming to Earth. Naruto asked if Izuku was sure this was what he wanted. Izuku smiled and said it was. Naruto, smiling back, said he would go with him. He added that Kiyomi would be fine because he would find a way to make her remember him. They were brothers no matter what. Izuku smiled and pumped his fist with Naruto. A portal opened, and Arlecchino, and Kiyomi stepped out. They ran to them and embraced their partners, crying out their names. As they hugged, the three noticed Izuku and Naruto looking worried and asked what was wrong. Izuku explained everything. The others reacted with a sharp rebuke and a light slap, and Izuku accepted it ruefully. Naruto winced at the slap. All of them grew teary and held each other close. Izuku reassured them that as soon as he defeated the monarchs he would find the girls and help them remember him. Arlecchino and asked for that promise, and Izuku promised. He then hugged them both tightly and offered a gentle, comforting gesture. Naruto wiped Kiyomi's tears away, promised to see her when it was over, and vowed they would be together. He smiled and gave her a reassuring embrace. She returned it with tears in her eyes. Breaking the hug, Izuku looked at Naruto and announced it was time. Naruto nodded. Izuku summoned the cup of reincarnation. It glowed gold. Naruto and Izuku smiled at their partners and told them that they would always love them. They shared a final nod and tearful farewell. Izuku used the cup in his time ability and traveled back in time with Naruto. Izuku appeared in his room and noted that it looked like the plan had worked. He looked at himself and saw that he appeared younger. Then someone called his name loudly. Dinner was ready. Confused, Izuku went downstairs and found his two new parents waiting for him. His new mother was Kim Kajinu, a well-known reporter, and his new father was Hisashi Kajinu, a billionaire businessman. Izuku smiled to himself and accepted that this might be his new life. He told his new parents that he was coming, then went to join them. Some time later, Izuku emerged from a tear in the sky alongside Naruto. People around them stared at the portal, wondering what it was. As Izuku and Naruto walked toward it, a ruler in human form appeared. Izuku asked Naruto to go on without him and said he would handle the visitor. Naruto nodded and teleported away. The ruler greeted Izuku with a formal address, calling him the Shadow Monarch. Izuku invited the ruler to talk inside, and they went to a nearby cafe. The ruler bought Izuku ice cream and spoke with gratitude, thanking him for what he had done for the world. Izuku brushed aside the ceremony and asked plainly what the ruler wanted. The ruler offered to send Izuku and Naruto to another world, suggesting they might find a purpose there. Izuku responded with a subtle display of power, a faint ripple of aura that made the ruler flinch. The ruler admitted the offer was because they believed the two young men had no clear purpose in this world. Izuku asked to postpone the conversation. The ruler bowed and left, and Izuku was left thinking about whether he truly belonged here and whether he should accept such an offer. As he pondered, two girls passed the cafe and Izuku recognized them. Seeing Ei and Arlecchino brought a wide smile to his face. He felt that their presence gave him a reason to stay. Meanwhile, Naruto was walking home, half expecting the ruler to say something upsetting. He then spotted Kiyomi and smiled inwardly at seeing her, relieved. Years passed. Izuku and Naruto helped the girls restore their memories and regain the abilities they once had. The girls were grateful that the promise had been kept. They introduced their parents to one another, and although the parents were surprised by the revelations about past lives, they accepted them. The group began living together as a family. One afternoon, Izuku studied with the help of Igris. Igris informed him that he had finally arrived at the correct answer, and Izuku asked where Ei and Arlecchino were. Igris explained that they had already left for school. Izuku reacted in mock outrage at having been left uninformed. Igris apologized and noted that Izuku had seemed busy. After a quick shower, Izuku dressed in his uniform. He paused and thought he looked presentable, then went downstairs. His family was at breakfast, except for Ei, Arlecchino, and Kiyomi. Naruto explained that the meal was their mother's specialty, and they ate quickly so they would not be late. At the school gate, Izuku and Naruto greeted the girls warmly. Izuku and Naruto each gave an affectionate kiss on their partner's cheeks, and the girls smiled. They entered the school together in a line. A teacher, Aizawa, approached Izuku. As Aizawa reached to tap his shoulder, Izuku's aura flickered slightly and Aizawa recoiled, clearly unnerved. He hurried away, stunned by what he had felt. After school, they walked home holding hands. Ai suggested they should go on a date later, and Arlecchino agreed that it had been a while. Izuku happily accepted and called them affectionate pet names. They kissed the girls' cheeks again and went on a double date, enjoying rides, treats, and dinner together. Later, Izuku stood on a cliff, waiting for a gate in the sky to open. He noted to himself that the preparations were beginning and felt a determined smile. He opened several portals, and small shadow daggers drifted up. He took one dagger as the rest circled beside him. An army of strange creatures emerged through the gate, led by a monstrous commander who challenged whoever was there alone. Izuku smirked and announced that he was not alone. His shadow stretched outward, and countless shadow soldiers rose to join him. The two forces faced each other in a sweeping, fast-paced clash reminiscent of an animated battle, with Izuku directing the tide of combat with swift, strategic movements. To be continued. 10 years later, Izuku had married Ei and Arlecchino and had two sons, Rin, 10, with Ei, and Kenji, 9, with Arlecchino. Naruto had married Kiyomi and had a daughter, Kira, who was 8. One afternoon, Izuku and Naruto sat in a quiet cafe. Izuku looked more mature, Carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had weathered many battles, Naruto had the same determined warmth, lines around his eyes showing years of hard work and joy. Izuku laughed and told Naruto that life was good. Naruto asked how his boys were doing. Izuku said they were fine and showed potential to surpass him. Naruto asked what he meant. Izuku explained that the boys had inherited his powers along with remnants of Ashbourne's legacy and the strengths of their mothers. Naruto found that interesting and asked about Kira. Naruto explained that Kira was doing well and that if she trained hard and mastered her abilities, she might surpass him in the near future. Naruto asked about Izuku's past in this timeline. Izuku said the Yagi family had started a successful restaurant and a 5-star hotel and were doing very well financially. When Naruto asked about others, Izuku described how Momo had become a businesswoman and married Shoto, who worked as a model. Jiro had become a rock star and married Denki. Ida had become a lawyer. The Pomeranian twins had become pro-league fighters. Mina had pursued dance and married Kirishima, who served as a police officer. Shoto's sister had become a fashion designer. Naruto reacted with surprise at the unexpected turns. Izuku added that the children he had adopted were happy with their parents and that he had made sure they were well cared for. Naruto said he was glad they deserved a happy life. Izuku suggested they not dwell on the past and enjoy their lives now. Naruto agreed, and they toasted to that. After spending more time together, they finished their meeting with a firm handshake. Izuku left the cafe, drove home, and arrived at his mansion. Outside, he saw his sons training in the yard. Izuku called out a greeting, and Rin waved back while Kenji offered a casual salute. Izuku noted that they were training and asked where their mothers were. The boys said their mothers were inside. Rin asked their father to train with them sometime and mentioned it was evaluation time. Izuku smiled and promised they would train together later. Inside the house, Izuku found Ei and Arlecchino. He greeted them affectionately, and both responded warmly. He kissed them on their cheeks, making them smile. Izuku proposed a movie or series night with the boys. Arlecchino agreed and went to call the boys while Ei prepared snacks and drinks. Izuku set up the living room. When the boys arrived, Rin asked what they would watch. Izuku said he had chosen Cobra Kai Season 6, Part 3, and mentioned it was his favorite. Kenji shouted excitedly, and Rin asked if Miguel was back in his prime. Izuku confirmed and invited everyone to settle in. The family sat together on the couch. Ei and Arlecchino cuddled up to Izuku while the boys nestled between them. Izuku smiled, thinking that he finally had the family he had always wanted. After a long journey of hardships, struggles, and challenges, Izuku had found happiness. The end. Before, Izuku Yagi was 4 years old. He loved his family, heroes, his friends, quirks, and analyzing things. He was quirkless. After, Izuku Kajinu was 20 years old and held many titles: Shadow Monarch, God of Darkness, King of the Dead, the Strongest, Ashbourne Successor, Death, Monster, One Army, and UI Monster. He was cold, serious, and calm, but also kind, ruthless when needed, and caring. He disliked his old family, Class 1A, fake heroes, villains, and anyone who hurt his wife. He also had a particular distrust of the Bakugo and Todoroki twins. He cared for his shadow soldiers, his wife, getting stronger, true heroes, ice cream, his grandparents, his brother, and his best friend. Appearance and abilities. Izuku possessed immense strength, speed, and durability, along with combat mastery and agelessness. He experienced accelerated development and advanced reasoning. He had an unlimited inventory and was fluent in the languages of monsters. He could manipulate shadows, elements, time, matter, reality, curses, mana, and longevity. He showed tenacity, advanced dagger arts, stealth, fierce determination in battle, and quick reflexes comparable to Quicksilver. He could perform rapid dagger techniques, wield ruler-like authority, and project an aura that inspired fear in dragons. His shadow abilities included breathing techniques, extraction, preservation, exchange, and a monarch's domain. He could absorb and nullify forces, employ powerful energy techniques, copy others and master all martial arts, and use UI, divine sight, metavision, flow, chi manipulation, and adaptability. He continued to gain new abilities as the series progressed. His system included his shadow soldiers and a growing arsenal of weapons. His known weapons included Kamish daggers, shadow daggers, Yang and Yin daggers, Demon King daggers, a Demon King longsword, the Venyazodona magic sword of destruction, a 1,000-year demon dagger, Chi energy daggers, devil anti-magic swords, and the night sky blade. He would acquire more weapons over time. Forms. He developed multiple shadow monarch forms, culminating in a final form. Wife, Ei Kajinu was 20 years old with the quirk of elemental manipulation. She was kind, calm, sweet, serious, and caring. She liked izuku, sweets, true heroes, Izuku's shadow soldiers, and training. Her dislikes aligned with Izuku's. Residence and possessions. He lived in a house with a detailed interior. He owned 13 cars and 2 bikes.